Dobrodošli na delavnico RC Advance z naslovom Izzivi znanosti in napredne diagnostike in terapije. In ker imamo danes ne samo predavatelja, dva iz ZDA, ampak tudi celo vrsto poslušalcev iz tujine, imamo namreč prijavljene udeležence iz Švice, Danske, Japonske, Belgije, Velike Britanije, Slovaške in celo vrsto poslušalcev iz ZDA, bom preklopil na angleščino, ki je pač mednarodni jezik. So, hello everybody, I switch to English. I welcome you to the workshop called Challenges of Science and of Advanced Diagnostics and Therapy. We will start with some keynote lectures, but before that, I would like to make a few announcements. First of all, I welcome all our guests, especially those from abroad. We see that we have registered participants from the United States, from Switzerland, Denmark, Japan, Belgium, United Kingdom, Slovakia. And I, of course, especially welcome all participants from Slovenian institutions, such as University Clinic of Ljubljana, Institute of Oncology of Ljubljana, the people from the University of Ljubljana, the Josef Stefan Institute, the National Institute for Biology, from pharmaceutical companies, Kirk and Leck, from the Ministry of Education, Research and Sports, and all the other guests. Why did we make this workshop today? Probably all of you know that we have been talking, or we had ideas to build a Slovenian Center for Proton Therapy for quite some time. This is, of course, directed towards patients, to treat patients. We have some estimate that Slovenia may need about capacity for 500 patients, plus or minus. But of course, once we have such a fantastic center that is the pinnacle of the art, pinnacle of technology in cancer treatment, it would be, in a way, blasphemous maybe, to not use it also for research. And therefore, we've been thinking, how can we make the best use of such a facility? And not only to use it for research in proton therapy as such, but in the wider fields, all the adjacent fields in diagnostics and other kinds of therapy. But of course, we cannot do research without researchers, and the best way to find out what is the best research is to ask researchers. Therefore, we have invited two world-class, top-notch scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs from this field that have a track record. You know, they are the #1 people in this community. We have also invited a lot of Slovenian researchers that already have ideas, or that might have ideas, or for which we think might use this opportunity to make very good research, even if it is not exactly in their field. That means not just clinical research, not just medical physics, but for example, also data science, artificial intelligence, and electronics, mechanics, any other technology that in a way influences medical sciences. And as we know now, we're talking about digitalization of medicine. We're talking about medtech. Now all the engineering disciplines are contributing to the advances of medical sciences, medicine, and health in general. I have to point out, you can ask questions anytime, any moment. We have two channels open. One is the YouTube channel from STA. So if you're watching us live on YouTube, on the channel of STA, the Slovenian Agency for News, you can go there, or you can also go on the Facebook page of the SIS Aegis, so of the Center for Medical Sciences. And also there you can post questions. The moderators will look at the questions, and then they will refer these questions to the presenters. And let's start with the first presenter. So the first presentation will be by Professor Thomas Bortfeld. I could now go on and on explaining his CV and his achievements in this field, but him being a modest person, let me just quote what he said when I asked him what he wants me to say. He says that he's most interested in solving problems in cancer medicine using methods of physics and mathematics. And this is exactly the topic that we want to talk about today. So I think at the end of his presentation, we will understand more what his competencies are, and how his ideas could be realized also a little bit in our center here in Slovenia, not just in the United States where he comes from. He is the leader of the medical physics department of the MGH, Massachusetts General Hospital, which is the extension of Harvard University Clinics. So Thomas, please, I think the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and hello, everybody. Let me start my screen sharing here. Okay, is this visible to all of you? I suppose it is. Yeah, thank you, Mark and Robert, for inviting me. This must be an exciting time for you. I sort of envy you, to be able to shape and create a new center for research is really a fantastic opportunity, in my opinion. So what Robert had asked me to do is to discuss the idea of advancing cancer medicine, both in hospitals, research centers, and also in universities, from my personal perspective. And one of my personal perspectives and memories is 2 years ago, Robert invited me to a meeting in Ljubljana, where we talked about various, topics in medical physics. And that meeting in Ljubljana reminded me very much and made me nostalgic about, thinking about my start in medical physics in Heidelberg in 1988. Unbelievable how long ago it is. And there are many similarities, actually, I realized, between Ljubljana and Heidelberg. So I was in this research group of Wolfgang Schlegel, who was my great advisor and mentor over many years. I'm somewhere in the back right here, and this is Wolfgang Schlegel. And I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was to be in this group, but also to be embedded in this environment, research environment in Heidelberg. Namely, that this research group was connected, or still is connected, with the German Cancer Research Center, which, as you may know, is the biggest cancer research center in Germany, one of the big cancer research centers in Europe. But then it was also connected with the University of Heidelberg and the University Clinic in Heidelberg. And it was connected with the physics department, where I did my PhD. And the physics department was at that time housed in mansions along the famous Philosopher's Walk, which is a nice path overlooking the Neckar River and a view of the castle on the other sides. From all these windows, we had this nice view of the castle. And when I walked through Ljubljana 2 years ago, I was thinking about that. There's many similarities between, the landscape there and your landscape. And that's the real landscape. And also, I think there's an opportunity to shape your research landscape similar to what we had in Heidelberg. I only realized many years later what an ideal environment that was. And I think it's worthwhile to try to, mimic that, but also to make it even better. And last not least, we had contributions from companies. Apple at that time was not the Apple of today. It was a much smaller company, but it was equally or maybe even more dynamic, and I was super impressed by them and to work a little bit with them on the side. And I just love the slogan, sharing innovation. I think that's what we all want to do. And this is actually a T-shirt that they gave me in 1988. I'm still wearing that today. So that's how much I have this time in my memory. So what did we do at the time? My PhD thesis was on the topic of IMRT, that's intensity modulated radiation therapy, which was very new, a new idea at the time. Today is standard of practice in essentially all clinics. And if you want to learn about what IMRT is, you now have to go back to a museum, which is also an interesting experience that what you have done in the past is now a exhibit in a museum. This is a very nice virtual museum built and created by the American Association of Medical Physicists in Medicine. They have many topics, imaging, therapy, and they also have treatment planning, which is where I did my work on IMRT. So here we have this chapter on treatment planning and treatment optimization. The main problem, and Mark mentioned that my sort of main interest is to solve problems in cancer medicine using physics and mathematics methods. That's really my passion. And what, the way I applied that in my PhD thesis is to the problem of inverting, or the inverse problem of radiation therapy. Namely, once you have a tumor shown here and a critical organ like the brainstem or the spinal cord or the rectum in the case of prostate treatments, you want to give dose to the tumor and no dose to the critical structure, right? And how do you shape the beams from the incoming, directions so that we get the optimal dose distribution in the tumor and as little dose as possible in the critical structure? That it was unclear at the time how to handle this problem, how to solve it. I framed it as an optimization problem and solved it with optimization methods. But there are other ways to do it, and only later I realized that many people were working on this problem at the same time. That's also something that's often happening, that you work on something and then you only later realize that there are other solutions from other people. But in any case, so this was my starting point in the field and my PhD thesis. Then the challenge was, how do we deliver these intensity profiles in a clinical setting? For that, I had to move to Houston in Texas for a year and did a postdoc there, working with a treatment machine that was a Varian LINAC, linear accelerator. And they had the first version of that machine that had a multi-leaf collimator integrated into it that was able to deliver fields continuously and dynamically with moving apertures, so that we could, in principle at least, shape these intensity modulated fields. It wasn't entirely clear how we would do that, but at least there was a possibility to solve that problem of how to practically deliver this new idea of treating radiation therapy patients. So I did that at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, and then I also spent some time with the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, where I implemented these methods. And those two are essentially the two leading cancer centers, or among the two leading cancer centers in the United States. Here's again from the museum, how to do it. So here we have an intensity profile that we want to shape and deliver to a patient, and then we translate this intensity profile to a trajectory of the apertures that are dynamically moving across the patient. Here we have two jaws, jaw B and jaw A, and this describes how we have to move them to create this intensity profile. So that was the second part of the problem. And the third part of the problem is to now build a planning system that you can use for your patients and to plan this type of treatment in a convenient way on the computer. So this was, as far as I know, the first version of an advanced inverse planning system that we built with my student Conrad Preiser. We named it Conrad after his first name, which also stands for conformal radiation therapy. So here you see the elements that you see in all modern treatment planning systems for IMRT, namely, so the dose distribution and the 2D slices, dose volume histograms, and what was new at the time is that you can shape and explore the trade-off between shaping the dose to the tumor and sparing the normal tissues interactively using these so-called dose volume points. Here, now, this is an introduction to the next speaker. Actually, here we have Rob Mackey, and Mark will introduce him. If you wanted me to introduce him, I would say this is the Elon Musk of medical physics and radiation therapy. So he really built this dedicated treatment machine called tomotherapy. Before I mentioned how we solved this problem using techniques that were already available and that were sort of adapted and modified to make this new type of treatment a reality, whereas Rock worked on an entirely new machine to solve this problem. So he will, I'm sure he will mention this briefly in his talk. So then today, moving fast forward 32 years later, societal impact of IMRT has been enormously big. Over 30 million patients have been treated with this technique until today. And there's an estimated gain of 2.5 million quality-adjusted life years through this technique. So this shows that, you know, if you start small with an idea and you develop it gradually, you can make a big impact on, you know, health and medicine in our field. So I want to suggest a few things for your center. So what I learned from this is that it's important and very useful to create a strong unifying focus theme that attracts people from different backgrounds, say in our field from medicine, physics, computer science, mathematics. And they can, you know, identify themselves with this goal and this objective and work on the solution together. And to make sure that we are not only solving some sort of theoretical problem, but we are solving a real problem that has a big potential clinical impact. So that's what has, in my view, been driving this field forward. And that's what we need to also identify in the future, and especially for your research center. Okay, so from my personal viewpoint and from the viewpoint of other researchers in the field, it is important to have academic freedom, not only to have this unifying focus theme, but to be able to wander around and explore different things on the side. And for me personally, this has been mathematics problems, because I'm a mathematics nerd. So I've been working on a number of sorry for this noise, on a number of mathematics problems. One was the discrete Hartley transform. So for whatever reason, I don't quite remember, I got fascinated by that. The Hartley transform is like the Fourier transform, but it has no imaginary parts. So it is very applicable to real-world problems in image processing and, you know, radiation therapy, for example. So I worked on this. Nobody ever was interested in this, but it was a lot of fun to think that through. And actually it made it into Wikipedia. I don't know exactly how, but it's in Wikipedia now. The second sort of side project that I was fascinated by is Chebychev polynomials. And Chebychev polynomials are polynomials, but they look like sinus waves in the interval from -1 to +1. And they have the fascinating property that if you have a sine wave in 2D here, as shown in this plot, and then you project it along this line in this direction, then you get a sine wave in one dimension. And you get that in all directions here. And this has obvious connections to image processing, image reconstruction in CT. And in fact, Alan Cormack, who got the Nobel Prize for CT, worked on the CT reconstruction problem in this way. And also in IMRT, as you can imagine, because there's a mirror problem in intensive radiation therapy, the mirror to the CT reconstruction problem. So I was fascinated by that for some time. Again, there was no real interest. The third side project was parabolic cylinder functions. So I got interested in parabolic cylinder functions. And I realized that they are ideally suited to approximate the proton Bragg peak. So here we see a proton Bragg peak shown by the dots, and the parabolic cylinder function approximating it. And here again, I thought, well, this is an interesting theoretical work, and you know, will be forgotten. But actually, here it turned out that this is being used a lot in practical, you know, treatment, beam modeling, and even in treatment planning. So this turned out to be a useful development, even it was very theoretical to begin with. So all I'm saying is here is that you need to give people the freedom to explore things not only along the main direction that you are moving towards, but on the side. So the side away from the unifying theme, to have this academic freedom. Okay, now today, since 2001, I'm here at the Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm sitting here. This is in this building. This is where my office is. I'm sitting right here. And what attracted me to the MGH is the possibility to do proton therapy. MGH had a track record in proton therapy since the 1960s, where we treated patients at the Harvard cyclotron. And in 2001, we built a proton machine in the hospital, clinically hospital-based proton facility that was among the first hospital-based proton facilities in the world. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the difference between the research done in a research center. Before I was at the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg, and it was great. I had a lot of freedom to explore not only my main project, but these side projects I described. The Massachusetts General Hospital is first of all a hospital, even though it has a big research group. It is probably the biggest research department in a hospital in the world, with an annual budget of $1 billion US, and almost 10,000 researchers working here in 30 institutes, which include 11 Nobel laureates who worked here over the years. But nevertheless, it's different. It's a different experience working in a hospital. Namely, it's clear that the patient comes first. So research is also important, but the patient treatment is the #1 priority. So everything is dedicated to making the patient treatments better. And that has a number of positive aspects. It also has a number of negative aspects, namely that there is less, freedom for research. There are no students directly at the hospital, because the hospital is not a university. You have to attract the students from the university. So it was a change of the culture when I came here and worked at MGH, even though I had been working, as I mentioned, at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York for a little while, almost a year. So what attracted me here is proton therapy. So most of you know this. Even with the most advanced X-ray therapy techniques, such as intensity modulated radiation therapy, it's possible to shape the radiation dose to follow the shape of the tumor, but there's this dose path. So many healthy tissues, even far away from the tumor, get significant radiation doses, as shown here. Whereas with proton therapy, the big physical advantage is that the protons stop in the tumor, and there's essentially no dose behind the tumor. So a much better possibility to focus the radiation to the tumor only and not to the surrounding healthy tissues. So here we had a dedicated proton therapy center in the hospital. It was new in 2001. It's a separate building. It looks small here, but actually this is a very big building. It has 2 floors underground that houses the machinery to make this proton therapy possible. This is the floor plan. We have 3 treatment rooms, 2 with the so-called gantry, and here's the cyclotron, which is the accelerator. So this is a big dedicated proton therapy center that we started in 2001 and made it work. It's now has been treating about 15,000 patients so far. Cyclotron, the big gantry that rotates the beam around the patient. This is the treatment room from the patient perspective with the covers attached. And yeah, so that's been a big part of my work since 2001. More recently, we found that we needed more treatment capacity with protons. There was a higher demand for proton treatments, and we needed to expand our proton capacity. Also, this proton center is now 20 years old, and so there was a need to innovate and to get to push the envelope and use the latest technology that's out there. So now we were scratching our heads where to place the new proton center, the second proton center that we were planning to build. The problem is there's no space in Boston, and that's true for many big cities as well. So then we decided we will place the new proton center in this existing building in the 3rd floor underground, which is the treatment floor that has our linear accelerators for conventional treatments. So this was the worldwide first installation of a new proton machine in a building that was designed for conventional radiation therapy. Here we have our floor plan. So this was designed for 8 linear accelerators, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we then decided to modify the last 2 linear accelerator rooms to the proton center, where the one former treatment room would house the accelerator, and the other one the gantry that rotates the beam around the patient. For various reasons, the main reason was to bring this technology into this existing space, we decided to go with a synchrotron instead of a cyclotron for acceleration here. Here we see the accelerator installed in the treatment room. And here we see how the gantry pieces are being brought in through the elevator shafts and the existing hallways into the other room. And this was really a matter of centimeters or even millimeters in some situations. So it was a logistic challenge to bring these big parts into that space. Here we have the gantry installed in the second room, and here we have the system as it looked during commissioning, which was happening last year. So from the patient's perspective, it doesn't look much different from a conventional treatment room. But there's, of course, a lot of machinery behind the walls here. And we treated the first patient in February this year. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what I've been doing here. And research in a hospital, as I mentioned, was an interesting experience. Patient comes first. There's no research-based funding, so I was spoiled from the German Cancer Research Center, where we had our little, it wasn't much, but we had our research budget dedicated to research. So even if we did not bring any external funding into our department, we could do quite a bit of research anyhow. This is not possible here. So here we have to bring in all the research through external funding. No students, and it's more difficult to justify side projects of the type that I mentioned before. Okay, so now let me say a few words about the future. And this is maybe to guide you or to give you some ideas where I see some of the research directions in your centers, in your new center could be. One is to build a future compact and affordable proton therapy accelerator. I showed you how we shrank in collaboration with a company called Proton, how we shrank the machine so that it fits in a conventional treatment space, but it's still very big. I showed you the gantry that's 10 meters high. And as a result of this problem, the machinery is very expensive, and relatively few patients benefit from it. It has been estimated that about 15% or more of all patients would benefit from the physical advantages of proton therapy, whereas in reality, less than 1% receive this type of treatment. So our hypothesis and our vision is that if we make the machinery more compact and more affordable, then many more patients will benefit from this type of treatment, and eventually maybe the majority of the patients could be treated with this type of treatment. So if that's our vision, then how do we get there? In my opinion, we will never be able to shrink the gantry so much that it fits into a conventional treatment room of about 50 square meters. So the only solution then is to get rid of the gantry and use a fixed beam. The one way to do it is that we have the synchrotron, sort of like a racetrack synchrotron on the walls of the treatment room. And then we bend the beam into the center of the room where we treat the patient, sort of inside the accelerator, if you will. This is a design that could make this possible. And the fixed beam solution is facilitated by recent advances in imaging, because if we can image the patient very quickly and accurately in different positions relative to the beam, then we can move the patient relative to the beam as opposed to moving the beam around the patient. Secondly is, I haven't mentioned that, but pencil beam scanning is a technique that allows us to shape the beams from one beam direction without using many beam directions from different directions of incidence. So that also helps to reduce the number of beams that we need to bring in and to make this idea potentially a reality. And then the development in soft robotics, where really interesting developments are happening in other areas that we could adapt and adopt to our field. So here's just a graphical representation of how this might look like. So we have the patient in a type of chair that can also be leaned backwards so that the patient can be treated both in the upright sitting and in the horizontal position. We have a flexible imaging system that is able to determine the patient's position and the internal anatomy in all these different postures of the patient. And then we can treat the patient after we have made any adaptation or adjustments if necessary. One aspect of this problem is maybe we could bring an MRI scanners into the treatment room, so to combine proton therapy and MRI scanning, which of course has the advantage that it's fast. At least a 2D slice through the patient can be imaged in much less than a second. And here we have some experimental setups where we tried to position the patient in various postures and positions and to see the impact on the internal organ position, and if we could use this in combination with a fixed proton beam. Here now we have a connection of this problem to the existing Raptor project that will be described later, and where many of us are very much involved. So I think that this could be an attractor and an accelerator of developments in that direction, namely the fact that we already have this existing Raptor consortium. So my suggestion here is one focus theme for RC Advanced would be a compact, affordable proton therapy. And let me mention one other option here, which is personalized medicine, meaning individualizing the treatment approach for individual patients. So far, we have been talking about focusing individualizing the treatment, but only in the sense that we individualize the shape of the radiation treatment based on the anatomy and individual characteristics of the patient and the patient's tumor. So that has been solved, I would say, to perfection through those techniques, including IMRT and proton therapy. But there's a big open field that's still left to be explored, which is the temporal optimization and optimization of radiation treatment in combination with, systemic therapies, including chemotherapy and targeted therapies, and also immunotherapy. So our physical and mathematical background can help here. The idea is schematically shown here. So the idea is that we treat the patient, and before we treat the patient, of course, we make an assessment of the patient's characteristics. But then also during the treatment, we learn about the patient's response to the treatment. And when, say, during the patient treatment, we learn that the patient is less sensitive to, say, radiation or chemotherapy than the average patient, then we could adjust the treatment based on that knowledge and re-optimize, and then start with a lower dose. And then after we learn this, then we treat the patient with a higher dose, or we switch to a different treatment regime. So that's essentially the idea. And we are already working with Robert and others, mathematicians in the Netherlands, to work on this problem from the mathematical side. One approach to solve this is Bayesian Networks, and I'm not describing those in detail, but we have already shown that by adding mid-treatment information that we gain from the patient's response to the treatment while the patient is under treatment, that we can make a better prediction of the patient's response to the treatment, as shown by this plot here, which is called the area under the curve. Yeah, let me go through this really quickly. So again, the idea is to assess the patient's response during the treatment, say in terms of tumor control probability, what's the likelihood of controlling the tumor of the patient, what's the likelihood of causing side effects. And this is the nominal curve, say, for the tumor control, and this is the nominal curve for the normal tissue complication. So when we learn during the treatment that the patient deviates from this normal, from this average patient characteristic, then we can adapt our treatment based on that information. That's the idea here. Like I said, this is already another ongoing international consortium project where the University of Wisconsin is involved and many other centers. So it would be wonderful to add the University of Ljubljana and the different centers that are involved today here. Suggestion for focus theme for another option for a focus theme here is modeling optimization of personalized medicine. Okay, so that's essentially what I wanted to share with you. This last and maybe most important suggestion is already, I summarized that at the beginning, namely learn from the successes and mistakes others who created similar research environments made. We made, that experience in Heidelberg. And like I said, I was only many years after I worked there, I realized what a brilliant setup that was. It was somebody, I don't actually know who that was, had the idea that we built a research center that is connected with the German Cancer Research Center that takes the problems from the university clinic, the clinical problems from the university clinic, translates them in the Cancer Research Center, has the research team work on solving those problems and then bring them back into the university clinic. And do that, of course, in the space, including physics departments, mathematics departments, and other fantastic resources in that environment, and also companies. So my suggestion here, my advice is build something like that in Ljubljana, and it will be enormously successful. You already have a fantastic research team, a great faculty and external advisors. You have the university, you have the university clinic, the Institute of Oncology, the Stefan Institute with physics and engineering, company involvement, and many others. So the prerequisites are there. It's just for you now to tap into those and make it happen in reality. Thank you for your interest.
Thank you very much, Thomas. It's a shame we cannot, we can clap, but nobody would hear that. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm really fascinating, and I would like to point out something that you said in a way, but I think I have to repeat it here, is that, the similarity between Heidelberg and Ljubljana, and I'm speaking to my Slovenian, what's the word, citizens. Slovenians have a little bit of a complex of being undervalued or less value. And here, I think this is a good example where Ljubljana can be as good as Heidelberg, and even doesn't have to start from zero, but, working together with you and with other friends like Rock and other institutions, we can really build together our top class research team here in Ljubljana with top class results. So the floor is now open for questions. We have a question from YouTube, so please just keep on asking questions on YouTube and on Facebook, and I will also ask the other panelists to ask questions. But let's first start. I got a question here. There is one or two? No, one question. Okay, by Peter Farjanic, and I will just read it out loud, and then we will ask Thomas to answer. So. There is some debate about the benefit of proton therapy versus photons in clinical patient care, especially considering much higher cost of proton therapy. In your experience, how much benefit is there? You mentioned 50% of patients could receive benefit. Does that mean slightly better dose metrics or drastic changes in quality of life? That's the question.
Yeah, so that similar question was asked many times in the past when we worked on the IMRT problem, because people said, we have this complex technology, we need, powerful computers, you need highly involved, highly complex technology to make IMRT treatments happen. So is it worthwhile? And so I think that there's an evolution of the development of the technology and the clinical trials that you can run to show the benefit. So it's these techniques will not change the clinical picture completely. So it's not like you can solve the cancer problem entirely by these technologies. So the excuse me, the benefit is more that if you make this technology affordable, then you can help many patients and improve the quality of life. And that has happened with IMRT, and many studies have now shown, as I showed, sort of the big picture. That there's a benefit, not that you can cure 100% of the patient, but you can make a difference in terms of the quality of life for a very, very big group of patients. And in this case, it was more than 2.5 million or so far. So that's my vision for proton therapy as well, that we will make it, with your help and other people's involvement, we will make it a technology that is not a super luxury type of treatment that is only affordable to a few, but that is in terms of cost, not much more expensive than conventional radiation therapy. And then we will be able to show benefits for many, many patients.
Thank you, Thomas. I hope this answers the question. We still have time. We have about 5 minutes time. So I'm asking also the panelists if you have some questions for Thomas. And of course, still everybody in the audience, please just come up with the questions, send them off all the channels you can.
It's Robert here. Let me ask you first, Thomas. This has been really a phenomenal journey. I think you took us through your life, but also I think through evolution of radiation therapy in many ways. So I think I would like to focus on the last part, which is the personalized therapy. Clearly radiation therapy is only part of the solution to the cancer problem. So how do you see this, optimal stopping that we've been working together, also integrating other therapies, and also in particular how that links with the advanced diagnostics, which obviously would be important to make appropriate treatment decisions?
Well, so optimal stopping was framed by us in the context of radiation therapy, as you know, but we also envisioned that it can be used in the sense of optimal switching, meaning when we realize that, say, radiation treatment is less effective in one patient, or other types of combinations of treatments are less effective, then we switch to different treatment modality. And in that sense, the mathematical concept can be applied to essentially any types of treatment. The benefit of radiation treatment is of course that it's much more quantifiable than chemotherapy and other types of treatment. So that is one aspect. Another aspect is how do we really assess the patient's response and make the right decision. So, and that leads me to your second question. So, how do we combine imaging and this idea? So, imaging, of course, has to provide the input, imaging plus other biomarkers. But we have to get the information about the patient and from the patient by using functional imaging of various kinds, and you are the expert in that field, so maybe you can answer your own question yourself. But that's essentially the high level picture.
Thank you for the answer. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. I have a question which is a little bit off topic, but we have some young and ambitious researchers listening in, and I'm trying just to ask in their name, or that is a question that I would have asked if I were in their shoes. Now, is this a good area? Is this a good field to direct their career into? Obviously, if you make the Slovenian Proton Center, and we have this facility here, some of the people will have to decide, continue what they're doing now, or benefit from the proton therapy center that we have, and think about all like these 4 or 5 topics that you mentioned. So what would you recommend to them? Would you be able to help them? Would you introduce them to the top areas, world-class areas? Because at the end of the day, if you're a young researcher, you want to have papers, you want to have results, you want to quick jumpstart your career.
When I was a student in Heidelberg in 1988, many of my friends were telling me that I'm crazy, that I'm doing my PhD in radiation therapy, because they were working in the European Molecular Biology Lab, which was just next door from the Cancer Research Center. And they were working on gene therapy, and they told me that, forget about radiation, in the future of cancer treatment, it's gene therapy, And now, 32 years later, you hear very little about gene therapy. It's essentially completely gone. Whereas we made a big, advancement through radiation therapy improvements. and there are always these hot topics coming up. And one hot topic right now is immunotherapy, and I think that is going to play a role, and there's no question about that. But it's not going to be the only cure of cancer. So my recommendation, my advice to those people is that don't get distracted too much by the hype that it's always popping up in different areas, and people will tell them, forget about what you do, so something else is more important. If you stay focused and make improvements in your area, you will have a very, very big impact by doing what you do.
Thank you, Thomas. And I think this is actually a very good introduction also to our next speaker, who has a similar career. So let me introduce Rock Mackey. He is Emeritus Professor at the University of Wisconsin. He is Vice Chair of the International Commission on Radiation Units and Measurements, ECRU. But most of all, he is an academic and I would say serial entrepreneur. He has made products and he has started companies including Pinnacle, Tomotherapy, and now lately Leo Cancer Care, which does upright proton radiotherapy. And he will tell us a lecture on operational oncology. And I think, Rock, take it away from here.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's great to be here, and it's a privilege to follow Thomas Bortfeldt, who is an old friend as well. Oops, I'm having trouble with the slide advancement. Let me just stop sharing and see if I can figure that out for a second. I'm going to go back to this mode here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, I'm just going to use this instead of going into slide mode. All right, I do have to say, I under University of Wisconsin rules, that I have a relationship with medical device companies. And in fact, that's probably why you invited me here, to give this sort of point of view. And I will talk a little bit about tomotherapy and Leo Cancer Care. This talk really evolved from a talk that Robert Uri and I gave in 2013 at the Horizons meeting, which was a meeting in Washington to talk about how we should respond to in fact, Joe Biden's leadership proposal for a cancer initiative called the Cancer Moonshot. So I do have to acknowledge a lot of the contribution here is from Robert. So operational oncology is a term that I think is useful to talk really about how one approaches oncology and to really integrate both the science and engineering. A lot of the talk is going to be about a Canadian phrase, how's it going, eh? And really the answer is, well, not good, you. And I won't go through all of these bullet points, but I will go and talk about ideas about how one really should approach, well, science and engineering in general to solve problems. But first of all, I'll talk about some of the, well, first I'll talk about what I really mean by operational oncology. In general, operations research is a discipline that uses advanced analytical methods for decision making, and really the military has picked it up in a very large way, and really the management, if you like, of a very complex problem is best done in a systematic way that involves a tremendous amount of attention to detail and management of the work. Well, how well is government policy working in the cancer space? And in fact, governments have taxes to discourage smoking. And the U.S., this is how we're doing. So if you look at a graph of the number of smokers in the state versus the annual state revenue per smoker, you would think that if you make it much harder or much more expensive for smokers to smoke on a yearly average, then fewer will. But really, you can see there's really no correlation. Probably the problem is an average smoker is paying the government under $1,000 per year for the right to smoke. How well we have formed by the media, Mark or actually Robert and I know and Thomas have talked about the hype around cancer. And in fact, this is a series of Time magazines that basically said that forget about surgery and radiation oncology. It's all going to be about drugs, chemotherapy, targeted agents, and immunotherapy. And in fact, a lot of the successes are really about much better specific approaches like surgery and radiation oncology. How well are we doing in funding agencies? This is our cartoon that has a couple of bureaucrats that are saying ignore them, they don't count. Really, the funding agencies is all about trying to pick the research that you think is going to be working better. And in fact, it's been shown that at least the National Institutes of Health grants really aren't scientifically determined. A very interesting publication that went through 130,000 grants and another one that went through 400 competing renewals of one of the institutes and another institute almost 1,500. Really shows that if you look at things like number of publications and citations in picking the grants, then the NIH peer review process really lacks statistical rigor, and there wasn't any correlation really between who was accepted in getting a grant and quantitative measures of that investigator group's science in terms of publications and citations. And really the fundamental problem is the reviewer sample size is too low really to provide an acceptable level of precision. So we are not using statistics to select grants very well. And in fact, a publication said that probably what we need to do is to select them in a different way, whether we should fund them or not, and then have a lottery to determine if one is funded. That may in fact be a more scientific way. If we have large error bars, then the best way to select is with a random selection. I'm not sure I agree with this, but we certainly have a problem with the traditional way that grants are funded. And I'm not complaining. I did very well. I brought in about $40 million of grants in my career. So I'm certainly not complaining because I wasn't successful. I was quite successful. One of the other interesting things is that faculty, if they're asked if they're purely basic scientists or applied scientists, the majority of people will say that they can't be pigeonholed into one category. And in fact, they tend to be distributed at the center, so they're equally basic and applied. There's a few interesting disciplines like medicine, where people say they're 30 or 35% in the case of agriculture and medicine are purely applied. But most investigators try to view themselves as doing both. Unfortunately, very little money actually comes to the applied side. If you actually look at the National Institutes of Health technology funding, only about, less than 0.25% really could be identified as technology. The rest really is lab science. And of course, lab science is following the scientific paradigm, which is designed on curiosity. You have a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis with an experiment, and then you refine the hypothesis. And in fact, clinical trials are using the scientific paradigm, effectively doing experiments on people. And in fact, we tend to then view, have a hierarchy of evidence, and the level A, the highest evidence, is randomized controlled clinical trials or a cohort study, down to level D, which is expert opinion without critical appraise, and then it's lumped in physiology, bench research, or first principles. And I really do take offense with the first principles. In fact, there was an interesting quip online. A crappy case series showing nerve conduction velocities faster than the speed of light would trump Albert Einstein's thoughts on the subject. So clearly there are fundamental things that we need to do besides just experimentation. We have to use our common sense. And another interesting, this was actually a paper, the clinical trial of parachutes, that said that parachute use to prevent death and major trauma related to gravitational challenge, a systematic review of randomized controlled trials. And in fact, people have jumped out of airplanes without parachutes, and actually a few have even survived great falls. So really, how well is clinical research serving us? Prior to 1998, we felt that hormone replacement therapy decreased the risk of heart disease amongst post-menopausal women. However, subsequent large-scale studies done after approval really found the exact opposite effect. And a very interesting Amgen study found that almost 90% of preclinical cancer research findings could not be reproduced. They actually went and did a random selection of preclinical cancer findings, tried to reproduce them in their own labs, and they found that only about 10% could be reproduced as reported. And then clinical trials, so that's preclinical. Clinical trials, another study showed that 35% of them couldn't be couldn't be repeated. And the fundamental problem there is most studies are too expensive, yet have few subjects. So they're, again, woefully statistically underpowered. So why have phase 3 clinical trials of technology assessment been so infrequent in radiation measurement? It's not because we're uninformed, overworked, or uncaring. It stems from the fact that most believe that trials should be both achievable and worth doing are unethical, because the two arms can rarely be viewed as equivalent. So there's a concept of equipose. You have one arm in one side and a different arm in the other. And this is perfectly okay if you have relatively little knowledge about which of the arms is going to be likely to be the one that is going to come out in the clinical trial. But unfortunately, if you have a lot of modeling of a field like we do in radiation medicine, then it's difficult for us to have equipoise. So for example, are Linux better than Cobalt 60? Well, clearly there's some technical reasons why they should be. Resolution is one. The dose rate is another. CT-based planning is better than planar radiograph-based planning. Well, CT gives three-dimensional information instead of two-dimensional information. That seems to be technically better. A computer-based optimization is better than weighting uniform beams. Again, having the ability to optimize the pattern of radiation has to be better than just having a uniform pattern. And really, I'm going to talk about it later, but the engineering paradigm is interfering with equipose. An engineering paradigm is really based upon a knowledge about the model of science rather than science investigation on people in particular. So one of the things that we have in a field of radiology today is qualitative imaging. So our reports, almost without exception, are unstructured. Our medical images are rarely tagged in a way so that they can be discoverable or useful for data mining efforts. So they're unstructured, unsearchable, qualitative. They're by definition less reproducible because it takes quantitation to even be able to compare reproducibility. And really, for oncologists, it's less actionable by oncologists. So I liken what we're doing in radiology as qualitative reporting, kind of like a weather report. Versus quantitative reporting, where one can see the temperature, one can see the wind velocity, one can see radar reports. And so what we really need to do is transform that, if you like, field, radiology, into more like the field of weather. And I'll point out a very particular thing. This is from Robert Urai's group. And it's really a comparison of qualitative versus quantitative 3D radiology. PET imaging has the capability of being far more quantitative than SPECT imaging. So the PET image is shown on the black and white images on the left, with far higher resolution than the SPECT image that's shown on the left. You can see the individual metastases, in this case, bone metastases, far more easily, but being quantitative, being actually able to determine the amount of activity as a function of position allows the response characterization and response quantification. And so it should be patently obvious that having better resolution and the ability to be quantitative is going to be good for medicine. In fact, this gives this sequence in time shows that if a patient is followed in time, then you can see how well they're responding. And Robert's group has shown for a long time that it's possible then to make decisions based on what drugs the patient should have. In fact, they found often that while it doesn't sometimes seem that a drug is working, often a frontline drug is working better than you would think if you actually go and examine by sequential imaging during the treatment. However, despite the obvious benefits from an engineering point of view, from a quantitative point of view, there's denial of sodium fluoride PET, as seen in the last couple of slides. And the reason for that is that there hasn't been enough, so-called level 1 evidence with the management of patients in prospective randomized clinical trials. The other thing, a big problem with the way we're doing science is that we have, if you like, a conveyor belt of data collection, extraction, data analysis, and publication, where we enter a new data set in one end and we get to publication at the other end, and then the data set is lost. So data in, data lost is kind of how we're viewing it. The job seems done when we publish. And in fact, I call a lot of the information we keep or as dark data. It's there, exists, but if you can't get it quickly, it doesn't really exist. In other words, we're so spoiled by Google that if we can't get data within a minute or two, we're not going to bother. And just like the galaxy is greater than 80% dark matter, more than 95% of data in oncology, I think, is dark data. If you can't get it, you can't use it. Another problem is most academic science is like an Easter egg hunt. It feels good, it's safe, but it's kind of ritualistic. And goal-driven researchers should not be satisfied with just collecting publications or grants. They are the way markers and provisions for the journey, but they're not the destination itself. And I think that big R&D must be goal-directed. Most research in the basic science is curiosity-directed, and funding agencies are primarily funding curiosity-driven research because it's kind of easy to do so. A goal-directed R&D requires a goal and a scientific model development to drive the required engineering. Because if it's a goal, at some point in the end, it has to be engineering. And you know, drug development is also engineering these days. And so it's not just applying to the physical sciences. So goal-directed R&D in healthcare almost always requires industry involvement. And the reason for that is because there's investment for the FDA, or in Europe, the CE mark, and other approvals, like getting paid for using the new technology or new drug. People often say that it's science or technology, but it really has to be science and technology. And I think of science as one extreme basic and technology, and the other extreme is applied. And in fact, they go together, and the link is instrumentation. In fact, instrumentation drives science. And this is a nice illustration of that. It was felt before the movies were invented, motion pictures were invented, that when horses were galloping, there was a time when they could tell that the horse was off the ground. All the legs were off the ground. And they thought it was when the legs were the most furthest apart, but in fact, it's the opposite. It's when they're closest together. And so you really need instrumentation to drive science. In fact, the Nobel Prizes are really about instrumentation advances so often. A new instrument comes about. The people that use it first are finding something new, and 20 years later they get the Nobel Prize for it. So there really is something like the science paradigm that I like to call the engineering paradigm. And basically, it's about modeling the science necessary to achieve a goal, using the model to design a device, process, or even a drug, test the device or process, and refine the device or process. And solving problems, real-world big problems, requires a goal and really has to use the engineering paradigm. But the engineering paradigm requires model building, and models are really a way of compressing existing knowledge. And model building is really modern scholarship. You don't have to have actually a big lab. What you need to do is you need to have a smart head for a lot of model building, and model building will be coming into the field of AI as well. It really is the most efficient time in history to be a scholar if you view it as model building. And where data does not exist for a model, you need to refine the model or do research to get the data it requires. And simulation to test the model and design experiments. And I believe that sharing models is much more important than publishing papers. And I like to show this diagram that shows that model building is part of science, in that you have a hypothesis and you have an instrument. You perform an experiment, get a result, and that helps you build a model. But on the other side, models then allow products and technology to be made. And in fact, it's the discovery of a goal that is, if you like, technology is the applied side. So in medicine, it's the technology is applied, for example, to human use. And you find that the model is not adequate. And so the engineers, if you like, if you describe them as the applied scientists, have to refine the model. And of course, we all know the engineering paradigm is widely used to replace the use of human subjects. So obviously, you're not going to crash people at 90 miles an hour or 100 or 90 kilometers per hour into a concrete wall. So are we really ready for goal-driven R&D? And by the way, I would say we don't want any more wars. Nixon declared a war on cancer in 1971, so it might be our longest war to date. It's certainly longer than the 30 Years' War. And there's been other wars on this and wars on that. And the fundamental trouble with that is the wars on X have brought the wrong solutions to complex heterogeneous problems. So a war on X brings A to what amounts to a heterogeneous B that is empowered by C. So if we look at, for example, the war on terror, the war on terror brings a military solution to what amounts to a heterogeneous guerrilla war that's empowered by social injustice. So in the case of cancer, we are using costly drugs to what amounts to a heterogeneous incurable disease that's empowered by biological entropy. So as long as we understand that it's a very complex problem that we're dealing with, then it's possible to attack the problem. But I would resist calling anything a war. It's a relevant project that is very difficult to solve. What we need to do is establish an adaptive evolution mimicking system of funding support that can respond effectively and efficiently to test and propel big ideas and solutions to problems. We need to encourage high reward, high risk projects that require risk reduction strategies, that require close attention to detail, and honest goal-driven analytics. And this requires close project management of process, scope, budget, and schedule. And really, industry is the master of this, and we need industry in order to reduce or retire risk. So a better example is the space race, and how is that different than the war on cancer? Well, the space race was goal-driven. Industry collaborated with public research institutions and universities. The projects were closely managed. Missing scientific models were fashioned, and new science was generated to extend and test the models. And you know what? The solutions were risky, and sometimes there was big problems. So you need to take risks, you need to make mistakes, you need to learn from the mistakes, rinse and repeat. Another example, of course, is a huge project was the Manhattan Project. And how huge was the Manhattan Project? Well, it was $360 billion in today's dollars. So much bigger than we could ever spend on a war on cancer, if you like. And the principal thing why it was successful is that you had a principal investigator who had broad knowledge, and you had a tough project manager that made sure that the project was going well. And in fact, project management has a lot to do with when you use divergent and convergent thinking. So divergent thinking is thinking outside the box. Convergent thinking is step-by-step execution. And there's lots of other ways that you can describe it. And down at the bottom, you can see that you can disparage divergent thinking as undisciplined or unfocused. And you can disparage convergent thinking by incremental or boring. And in fact, there's huge differences between a typical university research, which does a lot more divergent thinking and probably too little convergent thinking. And of course, they're really exploring a space. Their goal is not to develop a product like business. And in fact, businesses often do too little divergent thinking and way too much convergent thinking. Oops. So, but for the really difficult problems, then one has to have an exploration in phases, or sometimes called in the software business sprints, that really explore and focus, explore and focus, explore and focus, and this requires both science and engineering, not just one or the other. So, in my personal life, I'm going to talk about a couple. The first was the development of the first IMRT and CT scanner. It was called tomotherapy because it looked like a CT scanner, and in fact, it delivered the radiation with fan beams. And so you start with asking questions. How will the intensity modulation be optimized? How will the intensity modulation be achieved? Will the RF system for the LINAC interfere with an onboard CT scanner? And how reliable can you send power for a LINAC across a slip ring system, which hadn't been done before? And in fact, it was a successful commercial operation. We took the company public. It's now owned by a company called Accuray. Another example is a company that we formed a few years ago called Leo Cancer Care. And it was really formed because there was growing studies that showed that we really should be treating many patients upright. In fact, if you actually go and look at the indications, about 2/3 of the patients will likely, by the engineering paradigm, do better in the upright position. So in lung cancer, it's because the lung is more inflated. Because it's more inflated, there's less lung motion. Because it's more inflated, there's less normal tissue in the field. Case of breast, lying a woman on her back is probably the worst way to treat breast cancer, because the breast falls to the side. It means you have to treat a lot of lung and heart for conventional radiation therapy. In prostate, it turns out that the contents of the abdomen are falling down. The bladder is on top of the prostate. It positions the prostate well, and there is no movement or no differential positioning of the prostate with differential bladder filling. So in other words, men won't have to be giving prostate radiation therapy with their bladders full and with the urge to go to the bathroom. Liver cancer has been shown recently that the liver actually, as you transition them from the upright to the supine position, doesn't immediately adopt a new position, but slowly creeps over a half an hour or more. And so often then you would probably be missing the patient if you image them because the liver still hasn't finished moving. So one of the things that we want to do is develop a system for upright radiation therapy. So we will have a conventional, if you like, diagnostic quality CT scanner above the patient, being able to come down in the seated position or the so-called perched position when the patient is able to or for the prostate, so that you can clear the legs, if you like, from the prostate field, and then you can deliver the field. I'm just going to go into this because these are some movies. So you can see the CT scanner coming down. This patient's in the seated position. It would come down, scan the patient to make sure they're in the proper position, and then a conventional horizontal beam, as Thomas pointed out. You can often do a very excellent radiation therapy in the coplanar direction. In fact, tomotherapy is in the coplanar directions. Other radiation equipment today is in the coplanar direction. And instead of moving a big gantry around, you can easily move a patient around. And in fact, it turns out that you can set up the patients much more quickly in that position. And so not only is it better medicine, but it will cost a lot less. This is a comparison of 2 gantries versus 1 gantry in 1 upright room, and it's based on quotes that were given to the first customer of Leo Cancer Care, who was basically offered by a Proton vendor. Do you want 2 gantries or do you want 1 gantry? And do you want to try this upright system of Leo? And it's the equipment cost on the basis of the quotes is $6 million less for the hardware, and the room costs are $8 million. So $14 million for a 2 gantry a reduction in cost for a 2 treatment room system is significant. And then we really feel that since the upright radiation therapy is better medicine in so many cases, head, neck, lung, liver, prostate, that most of the patients, 2/3 or more, could be on the upright system. And really then the gantry becomes a specialty machine. It's for kids who, in fact, many kids could be treated upright as well. It's for leg sarcomas. It's for adults who can't sit down, and adults needing general anesthesia as well, like some kids are. So in terms of practicalities, they found that this suited them better. So a summary of the problem or opportunity. And again, every time you have a problem, you have an opportunity. So you should look for problems. I always look for problems. And I'll tell that to the students on the basis of the question asked to Thomas. If you see a problem, look for an opportunity. So we're moving too slowly to solve large medical problems, especially cancer. We've not spent enough effort on modeling the science so that we can turn our efforts to finding out what science is missing and applying the knowledge. And I think part of the problem is cultural. Incremental hypothesis-driven science is safe. Many people view project management as not science and therefore not worthy of support. And funding process encourages competition, not cooperation. And I do believe that cooperation is far more important than competition in solving big problems. So goal-driven research and development has been successful before and can be applied to cancer. And industry can be part of the solution. And I do want to end by saying that Leo Cancer Care is cooperating with Cosylab. Cosylab is developing all of the software for the Leo Cancer Care, both to integrate it with their existing Proton software that they've been very successfully selling to most of the Proton vendors on the planet, but also for the new technologies that's required by Leo. So I want to, since Mark is the moderator, I want to personally thank Mark for his help in Leo Cancer Care. Happy to take questions.
So thank you very much, Rock. Perfect timing. We have 10 minutes left for questions. So we are exactly on time and on track. So let's check if we have some questions over YouTube. No, there are no new questions from the audience. So then I would ask the panelists for questions. Robert?
Yeah. Hi, Rock. Thank you so much for giving, I guess, so many ideas that's probably hard to even start. But I'll start with one which I think is very impressive, and the data, which is the data about the dark data. So I think clearly what you hint to is that there's a lot of data that goes to waste. That organized clinical trial, not that they're not needed. But definitely there is a big wasted opportunity by not capturing all the data that we could from all the patients that have been treated. So how do you see this moving forward? What is needed to organize the data in a way that's mineable, that we can uncover the data? What's the hidden data that would most likely bring most of the new added value? So how do you see this attack at the
I mean, the simplest data, and in fact, the majority of data happens to be radiology data. 90% of data stored in medicine is radiology data, and that's because the data sets are so large. Health records are about 10%. And in fact, we've done a great job in the DICOM specification so that it's relatively easy to pass data from different vendor machines. No one has any trouble with DICOM at all. And now we did 20 years ago, but it's been largely solved because of standardization. We don't have that with most of medical records now. It's very difficult because the vendors aren't using actually pretty good standards. I mean, we have standards. FHIR is coming, But you know, again, FHIR is not even a complete standard for passing medical records around. And it turns out that most installations of medical records have so much customization that there's little standardization between clinics. And in fact, one of the problems is that in the United States, for example, the FDA does not require an EMR to have the same kind of standards that a radiation therapy treatment planning system or a display of medical images. They have to be FDA approved, but a EMR doesn't. And so it means that there's so much customization, there's no standardization. So that is first really going to be required to make any big progress in being able to mine data. And so it's a governmental responsibility. And hopefully there will be some effort on this going forward.
Thank you for the answer, Brock.
Yeah, may I ask one question? I saw that upright position is preferred in certain cancer treatments. Then how can you implement MRI systems in positioning? Because all MRI systems, nearly all of them are not upright.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. But don't forget, that's an opportunity. So in fact, there are 3 vendors of upright MR systems. And in fact, Thomas Sportfeld in his talk showed that the capabilities of the Phonar system. So yes, no, I think upright. There are some upright CT systems, and there should be some upright MR systems. So, but how do we deal with that in the near term? Well, the near term, if you have a system that can give you a CT scan both in the recumbent position and the upright position, we know we have movements of millimeters and even centimeters in some cases, but we can produce vector maps that show how individual organs move as a function of the gravitational change. And then that can be applied to MR systems in the recumbent position. And that vector map based on CT then can be used as a way of getting what the MR would look like if there was an upright system. But I think the ultimate solution is to build upright MR systems. And in fact, we've started at Leo working on the basics of what one would need in the upright position. And there, in fact, one of the issues, interestingly, is moving the MR system while you're into position. But that's been done before horizontally. So, I mean, there are surgical systems that have MR systems that move into the surgical suite, for example. So it is possible to move an MR system horizontally. It should be possible also to move it vertically.
Okay, thank you very much for answers and for excellent talk.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe Primož, you want? We had a discussion on upright and imaging some time ago. Maybe you can comment on this as well. I would be curious to get your words also in this challenge.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Yeah, but the problem is that majority of equipment is standard equipment.
Yep.
People are lying in supine position. So,
yeah.
This is probably the difficult part.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, but again, we're researchers. We want to solve problems. So I think you start from what the patient need is, and there's lots of fields where we already know the patient need is to upright imaging. That's why there's MR systems that can move patient the upright. So how are they being used today? Well, they're used, for example, in spinal surgery. When you actually have a patient upright, there's loading on the spine. You see much better the diagnosis of the condition. Surgeons can then measure the mechanical equipment that they're going to need, sometimes to join the spine together, which is different. The result would be different if they made the measurement in a recumbent position. So they need to know that information, and they're using MR to do that today. Well, in fact, there's many indications for CT in the upright position. Spine is another good example. MR is good at showing you soft tissue, but not so good at showing you bone. Surgeons are starting to think about that. For example, a uterine prolapse can't really be diagnosed well in the recumbent position. It can be easily diagnosed in the upright position. There's a Japanese group that has developed a vertical CT scanner, a diagnostic CT scanner already that has shown that. So I think, you know, gravity is a very useful thing to the human race, and it's going to turn out to be a very important thing in diagnosing patients as well. And we never give a chest X-ray lying down. We almost always have a patient standing for a chest X-ray. Why is that? Well, it's because the lung is more expanded, therefore the lung is less density, and any lesions that are unit density can be much more easily seen in the upright position, or it can be imaged with less dose because there's more contrast. And so, in fact, CT scanners for low dose lung screening for smokers. I mean, elderly smokers who have had 20 pack years should have an annual low dose CT scan. And that should be done in the upright position, just like a chest X-ray is almost always done in the upright position for exactly the same reasons. So again, you point out a problem. Yes, we have a problem with our current inventory, but our current inventory is not meeting our needs, so therefore it's an opportunity.
Thank you, Rock. Time is up, but we got 3 questions and comments through the YouTube channel, so I'd really like to engage also the audience outside. So let me go through these questions briefly. So first of all, there is a comment by John Stiles. He says, and I'm reading, "Brilliant technology coming from Rock and Leo Cancer. We need to advance this technology as quickly and safely as possible. Looking forward to their prototype testing." Good. Thanks, John. Then there is one more question by Janko Burger. You presented clear technical, medical, and economical benefits of upright. What are the main challenges on the road to faster penetration in the PT world?
Well, I mean, again, it's always about people trying it. So the first unit's going to come into Europe at the end of the year. The first part of that system is coming in. The rest will come next year. And so that site will, we can't announce it yet, for various reasons, but that will prove a lot of things. As I said, there's some Japanese efforts as well. You might know that the per capita use of CT in Japan is twice what it is in anywhere else in the world, including America. They love CT scanners, they love MR scanners. So I think a lot of the work is going to come from Japan. Leo Cancer Care is already scanning animals, horses in the upright position. So it's just a matter of people seeing the importance of really working with gravity instead of just ignoring gravity, and having gravity, for example, in radiation oncology, give you opportunities to avoid less normal tissue in the field or have more reliability in setup. So it's going to take time. It's going to take a few years for people to start to believe it. In fact, you know, in case of tomotherapy, in tomotherapy, we had to prove 3 things. We had to prove that coplanar fields were by far more useful, and you rarely move the couch anyway. So why bother building a machine that could do that? You really didn't use electron beams, so there's really no point in electron beams. And with intensity modulated radiation therapy, you shouldn't use high energy photon beams. And so there wasn't really any need to have more than one photon energy. So you could build a much more compact, more reliable in principle machine if it's not coplanar, if it's a single energy, you forgot about electrons, which aren't used much. In fact, many machines have been built like that today. The Halcyon machine, the Electa Unity machine, the ViewRay machine all have those principles. So it takes time. It takes I mean, I often say it takes a half a generation to have disruptive technology enter medicine because we're so conservative.
Thank you. The last question is by Andrew Dyke from IBA, Proton Therapy. And it goes, in your opinion, what do you believe are some of the other technological challenges in proton therapy that, if solved, would further expand its use?
Yeah, I mean, clearly what we need to do is to make the precision and reliability in terms of delivery the same in proton therapy as we do in photon therapy. And protons, there's physical differences, obviously, and the most important one being exactly where's the beam going. It scatters, and it has a slowing down that needs to be better characterized. Better CT scanners would be useful, but also there are some beam monitoring things. So prompt gamma is one. Prompt PET is interesting. I think proton radiography is also interesting. So those technologies are going to make protons probably as precise and accurate as conventional photon therapy. And that's really the thing. Also, of course, you've got to reduce the price. It's too expensive. There's not enough accessibility, especially in poorer countries.
Thank you, Rob. So, Andrew, that was a direct answer to you, I guess, the price bit at least. So now this session is over. I thank again the two speakers. Well, I try to clap, but that's all we can do. And I give the word now to Primož Strojan, who will take over the chairmanship from me. I think we don't need a break. Let's just continue. We are not so bad on time. 4 minutes late. I think it was worthwhile waiting the 3 questions, but I think we can continue as we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, it's time to proceed with the second part of the workshop. But before we start with presentation scheduled for this afternoon, I would like to go back to the idea of the workshop. As you heard, thinking about National Proton Therapy Center in Slovenia actually initiated the idea of establishing common research platform. I mean, research center for promoting ideas and planning of research in the field of advanced diagnostics and therapy in oncology. And in order to check the interest in such center and identify resources, research teams, available infrastructure, and potential areas of future activity that could act together in this context, we organized this workshop. So this is only the first of such workshops, as Slovenia research community in this field certainly offer much more than what will be presented today. As you may notice, there are no representatives of both University Clinical Center. And the reason is simple: COVID epidemic, which we are witnessing at the moment. And the burden of the COVID largely falls on these two larger Slovenian hospitals. So you can expect similar events also in future. If I return back to today's presentation, we have 6 lectures in a row. But as emphasized, as the emphasis of the meeting is on resources, interest, potential areas of collaboration in the frame of research center advance, and not on content of the lectures themselves, we will save questions that eventually arise during each lecture for the roundtable. Okay, so the first lecture will be presented by Professor Dušan Šuput from Faculty of Medicine, and the title will be Advanced MRI Techniques for Tumor Detection Without Contrast Agents. Please, Professor Šuput.
Microphone.
Professor, microphone.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to switch the microphone on. Okay, I'll try to share the screen, and I have to choose what to share, actually. I hope you can see that. Can you see? Okay, I see nodding. So I will start from beginning. All right. So the title is how to use MRI techniques without using contrast agents. In beginning, they said that gadolinium-based contrast agents are harmless. Now we know they are not. In some cases, they can be very harmful. In some cases, not. But if we go to MRI imaging, if you image just water, it's clear and you get, let's say, a white signal in T2 images. If you put something in the water, then you see something because you make a kind of artifact. So actually what we are looking is things that change due to environment. And our goal was from beginning to use MRI techniques that would somehow enable detection, very clear detection of cancer without using gadolinium contrast agents. So the first case would be, let's say, prostate, because it's been a gold standard to use gadolinium contrast agents to delineate the tumor. And one of PhD students who's now in UK, first he was in Cambridge, now he's in Newcastle, he's working on prostate MRI, and his mentor from UK was present at PhD thesis defense. And he says that in most cases, if somebody works on prostate cancer with MRI, he would not need contrast agents. But for people that are not skilled, this is still important. But here with diffusion-weighted imaging, you can see very clear delineation of the tumor, which is not seen on normal image. And we do that regularly. And fortunately, we get patients in from Italy because they say that our service is somehow superior to some services in northern Italy. The other thing which we would like to have is ATP imaging. And with amide proton transfer imaging, one could really advance diagnosis of tumor. Actually, this technique enables gradation of tumors because it's a kind of chemical imaging, and it's a part of chemical exchange saturation techniques, or like magnetization transfer. But here we use amide groups in proteins, and proteins are more abundant in rapidly growing tissues. So if, in the case of low-grade glioma, you can see tumor very well, but here with proton, amide proton transfer, you don't see much, which would mean that the tissue is not very rapidly proliferative. And here we have glioblastoma, a rapidly growing tumor, and you can see very clearly the tumor here too. And this represents a rapidly growing tumor. So I think there's plenty of room that for MRI imaging in oncology. And unfortunately, we still do not have this software, which is for us, as we are a research institution, not a clinical institution. About 30,000 euros is quite a lot for us. And maybe next year we will be able to buy that. Then the other thing, which is somehow a reason why we came in contact with Professor Yarai and Krzan and Stroyan and many others, is also with Omladic from mathematics, how to make some algorithms to be able to treat with proton or hadron beam organs that move due to, let's say, heart action, or, well, on this slide, it's, I'll do it the same. Okay. You see, here, if you have something in the lung, you see that the lung would move a bit, and the pressure here on the liver can also move the liver a little bit. But this image was taken at the breasthold. So if a patient would be breathing, you would have large movements of liver, or of course even larger movements in the lung. And of course you can have also sarcoma in the heart, which would move a lot too. So how to make correct algorithms to know how to adjust the beam so that only the tumor and all the tumor would be hit with proton beam. Now, the previous lecture was very, very interesting, and now I have more questions than answers. How can we use MRI in proton therapy? You know, it's really, everything is done in supine, not in upright position. So things would change a lot. And I don't know if proton beam can only be, if this technique can only be used in upright position, because I saw on one slide the patient lying on the bed too, especially in the rotating gantry. I think that's about all I can say briefly. They told me 5 to 10 minutes. I can talk more during discussion, but now we came to the end, and thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Professor Šuput. Obviously, our initiative should be very welcome for you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Assistant Professor Andrej Student from Faculty of Mathematics and Physics, Ljubljana, and he will talk about challenges in medical and physics research in the field of advanced diagnostics and treatment. Please, Andrej.
Thank you, Professor Strojan. Let me share my screen. Also have a set of slides I would like to share. Okay, so here I go. So I'm a assistant professor at the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics. I also hold a position as a researcher at the Jožef Stefan Institute. My area of research are nuclear instrumentation and development of new image analysis method, and lately also some clinical research. Today, I would actually talk about medical physics research group, and you can find us at www.medphys.si. Here is a snapshot of our page, and here is already some therapy, so Slovenian Proton Center reports which are available there. So our group is actually composed, or is living on 4 different institutions. One is the University Medical Center. So there's the 2 leading medical institutions, the University Medical Center and the Oncology Institute. But there's also Jožef Stefan Institute and the University of Mathematics and Physics within the Faculty of Mathematics and Physics within the University of Ljubljana. And our goal is actually, we are focused on patient benefit. And to do that, we have our work can be divided into different categories. Here I selected some categories, but I'm sure there's more. So we do a lot of work on the instrumentation development, either through development of PET instrumentation of biomedical imaging, We develop new biomarkers. So some are pharmaceutical biomarkers, the other ones are imaging biomarkers. We are modeling diseases, we're modeling treatment, and we're also focusing lately on personalized medicine. So in continuation, I will show some different examples of this. 10 minutes is not much, so I couldn't possibly present all activities that we do. Even so, I might be even too long, so I'll just go in and try to be brief. Of course, all questions can be addressed later on. So first, on PET instrumentation, we have a nice opportunity that we can share our lab with the high energy physics development laboratory. So you can actually profit from detectors which were developed for different purposes. Here we are using Cherenko photons, which have the highest, they're very fast, they're released immediately upon interaction, so they give good timing information. And in PET, timing information can be used in many different ways. Here we just show on the image on the bottom, you can actually see the timing resolution that we got, which was excellent. And that timing resolution can be used in different ways, as already said. One way is to build adjustable different PET geometries. As we show here, you can actually think of PET panels rather than PET rings. And PET panels with suitable timing resolution can actually avoid the artifacts, with the spreading artifacts, which you see on the image on the bottom left. This is what you get if your timing resolution is poor, and you actually, when you improve it, you get a dot back, which is something that you can do. So this, here I always list a couple of partners. I give a couple of flags to see that, for you to know who we are working with on this project. Going on with instrumentation is the Biomedical Imaging group. They focus on merging different levels, different sizes of tissues and organs. So they try to merge imaging on the macro scale, which is shown on the top row on the left, with the micro histological samples. And they do that on many different clinical applications, or there's many different clinical challenges they can answer. They focus on inflammatory diseases, where they look at physiological problems. They can do some dermatology, arthritis experiments. They're also working in finding out different histological samples, the quality of the category of histological sample. Also, they're thinking about DORA. And they also collaborate a lot with industry, Photona, on laser therapy, for example, laser epilation. Now to more oncology-focused research. One thing that we're doing is we're trying to improve breast cancer screening. And for breast cancer screening, the new approach is to try to implement personalized screening. To do personalized screening, you have to assess the risk. And one component of the risk assessment is also radiological density of the mammograms. Here we developed a routine that assesses density from our patients in the DORA program. On the right, we show what the precision of our algorithm is. It can certainly be improved, so it remains a challenge. But it's nice that in the PIRATS 4 category, which is the most challenging one, because risk increases a lot in that category, we have the highest accuracy. So we have partners from Belgium. Then another area of research we're working on is, of course, new modalities, new therapies in cancer, such as immunotherapy. And in immunotherapy, we have two challenges. One is the selection of patients. Here we did some great work on quantitative analysis of PET images prior to treatment. And we see, so ours is the blue curve, and this is probably the best as you can get from any routine, particularly those ones. On the red one represents the standard CT-based treatment assessment done 4 months into treatment. And on the left, we show that, again, quantitative analysis of PET images can show us adverse effects that appear during immunotherapy treatment, and we can clearly separate patients which suffer from adverse effect in 3 different organs. going on. So can radiotherapy can be made personalized? We hear talks about MRT early on today. So one of the problems with IMRT is that the plans that you might deliver to the patient are not homogeneous. And of course, then the standard paradigm of validating therapy using therapeutic volumes is not great at assessing the quality of the delivered beam. So new infrastructure, new paradigm is needed. So ICRU formed a new report committee, and the leader of that report committee is the leader of our group, Professor Robert Jerai. Another aspect which we already talked about is the sensitivity of proton beams to involuntary patient movement. Here I just show a simple animation of what a proton delivery might look like if the patient anatomy changes during delivery. On the left side is the plan as it was designed. On the right hand side, the anatomy slightly changed because patient went in a different breathing phase, and clearly you see that the activity or the dose actually gets delivered also to the areas where we don't want to have activity. And that was, so to answer those needs, you need adaptive proton, adaptive particle therapy, and this is done by, so Slovenian researchers were actually the initialization partners or the funding partners of the Raptor collaboration. And this year or the next year we'll get funding by the EC Marie Curie scheme in collaboration with partners from all the leading proton and particle therapy centers around the world. Before we end, so another important aspect in data science or medical physics or medical research is the collection of data. Here we are part of the Network of Imaging Alliance, Network of Imaging Excellence Alliance, and the paradigm behind behind NICS is to collect data both at the local hospitals and also at the global nodes. And there's a intricate way of how the data and analytics is shared between those institutions. Currently, the same infrastructure is used to collect COVID data, so you see a lot of different institutions on the bottom who are actually sending data from their local COVID patients to our node. And right now we are operating also a mixed node at both our clinical partners. So to conclude, Medical Physics Research Group is building a puzzle of different techniques that would benefit patients. And of course, new facilities such as RC Advance are extremely important to complete that puzzle, to bring new pieces in. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Student. Very nicely presented activities of your group. And through all those activities, also the diversity of problems in oncology. Thank you very much. The next lecturer is Professor Tomasz Vertovec from Faculty of Electrical Engineering from Ljubljana, and he will talk about automated delineation of organs in risk in head and neck region, advances of deep learning. Please.
Okay, thank you for this introduction. I hope you can see my screen with the presentation. So, just a second, I can control. Okay, as you probably know, one major task in radiotherapy planning is the delineation of organs at risk from the acquired medical images. So, if we focus on the head and neck region, this is particularly challenging because there are several organs at risk in the head and neck region. They can be small or curved, like some optic nerves or some small glands, and they can be soft or bone tissue, like for example glands or the mandible and so on. Additionally, the variability of medical images is quite high, so this hampers the whole process. There are different imaging modalities modalities we're dealing with, for example, CT, MR, or PET, each imaging modality is susceptible to its own artifacts, like noise, inhomogeneity, partial volume effects, motion, and of course, different anatomical structure or the same anatomical structure also appears differently in different images. For all of these reasons, manual delineation of these organs at risks is quite a tedious and time-consuming process and is subjected to a quite severe intra- and inter-observability, although there are several delineation guidelines for manual delineation, like the one published by Brouwer et al. In 2015. This task is still quite tedious. So, a solution to this problem is to use automated delineation or auto-segmentation, like it is called in this field. This is enabled by computerized techniques that are based on medical image analysis. And this, to some degree, eliminate the subjective bias of the observer, accelerate the whole process, and finally, basically reduce the total workload in terms of human resources, in terms of oncologists, radiologists, and people who do this manually. So we can either choose from manual or auto-segmentation, but we focus on auto-segmentation. Nowadays, there are two basic approaches to this. One is the conventional one, and it's atlas-based, and the more modern one is based on deep learning. So just two quick examples that show some methodological frameworks for atlas-based and deep learning-based approaches. So in atlas-based approaches, a new image with unknown segmentation masks is registered to an atlas. An atlas is formed with many images with known segmentations. And then, according to these registered images, we obtain segmentation masks that are propagated back to the original image. We can then apply different approaches how to select an optimal atlas, because usually we have different atlases. And in the end, we fuse different labels that were propagated to this original image, and we obtain the final segmentation. On the other hand, deep learning is based on systematically training our deep learning model through a deep neural architecture on a large number of previously annotated images. And the advantage of deep learning is that it systematically learns the most appropriate features that are then used that are then merged into a model. And then when we test with a new image, in this new image, these features are automatically searched for and result in a final segmentation masks. The properties of both ABAS and deep learning are, let's say, a little bit different. So atlas-based segmentation has been implemented in many commercial tools, and a lot of this software that comes together with treatment machines offers some kind of atlas-based segmentations, but it has some drawbacks because it largely depends on the anatomical variations that can be observed in different libraries that form the atlases. For head and neck, it is known to underperform for really small or thin organs at risks. And the problem is also quite long execution times, which limits this application for online applications, so for applications that should be some correction during the treatment and so on. But as we can see on the right, the first deep learning approach emerged somewhere in 2016, and we can say that the atlas-based segmentation has plateaued until that. But after 2016, a lot of deep learning approaches emerged and have increased in number since. The problem with these approaches is they require a relatively large image database for training. They can also result in false positives if we don't constrain the location of each organ at risk beforehand. And what is currently the problem is that we cannot identify which feature is the most important for segmentation, because deep learning model is some kind of the black box. So there is a lot of computational burden in the offline phase when we train the model, but when we test it on a new image, this is quite fast and therefore appropriate for online applications. From the results point of view, if we look in terms of the volume overlap defined by the Dice coefficient and with the surface distance usually defined by the Hausdorff distance, we can see that the deep learning approaches in generally outperform atlas-based approaches in both metrics, so in Dice coefficients and the Hausdorff distance for practically all of the organs at risk in the head and neck region. Maybe an exception is for brainstem. This is maybe because it has a quite common shape and can be easily also modeled by atlas-based models. But if we just focus on the Dice coefficient, we can see that the improvement in the best performing methods is quite large. And let's say, if we take apart cochlea and so on, it's around 10% of improvement if we consider the volume overlap. So what are the future considerations for auto-segmentation with deep learning in the head and neck region? So in terms of image modality, we need to explore different modalities. So the CT modality is currently required because we do the dose delivery map on CT images, but we can also use MR images and the information from MR images to fuse this information and obtain better auto-segmentation results. So in terms of organs at risks, for example, the spinal cord, brainstem, parotid glands are the most studied organs at risks in the head and neck region, and were given most focus, but a lot of focus should be given also to other organs such as these pharyngeal constrictor muscles, larynx, cervical, esophagus, and so on. And these are all important for radiotherapy planning. So image databases, there are quite a lot publicly available image databases, but what we need to do is to evolve the databases to include a larger number of cases and, of course, corresponding reference delineations, which should be also performed by multiple observers at multiple times and at different institutions to obtain a very good reference data for our method development. So the methodology will advance. So despite the deep learning is already been used in this, let's say, scientific studies and reports, it is expected that different advances in AI, such as adversarial learning and so on, will be included into the methodology, which will make these methods even more powerful. Moreover, if we work on image databases, these methods will be also trained on larger databases, and therefore their performance will improve. The ground truth, this is connected with image databases, again, needs to be performed by multiple experts at multiple institutions. Performance metrics. So far, we use overlap metrics in terms of volume overlap and distance metrics in terms of the distance between our the surface of the obtained segmentation and the surface of the reference segmentation. But here, some studies already indicated that the best thing would be to combine these geometrical metrics with some clinical scores of clinical acceptability and risk assessment. And finally, in terms of segmentation performance, it is not only important how good the segmentation is against our reference segmentation, but what is the dosimetric impact of this auto-segmentation. So is there a clinically relevant endpoint if we improve the segmentation, for example, for a couple of percents or not? So we need to also to include the dosimetric data into our segmentation results. So for any additional information, you can check the recently published review papers that we published together with Professor Stoyan in medical physics. It's exactly on this topic. And here I would acknowledge our research agency that is funding a project for this head and neck radiotherapy planning. So this is all from my side. Thank you for your attention. And I give back the word to you.
Sorry. Thank you, Professor Vrtovec. Positive results of your research will certainly spare us from very laborious work. Just one question that came from Professor Mackey. He's asking how should we organize multiple experts to provide the ground truth training data? Can you answer to this question?
How can we organize
multiple experts to provide the ground truth training data?
Yes, so ideally this would be that we collect a database of images and we share them with different experts at different institutions, because different institutions use different protocols, and the result may be in a hub or in an environment, they may provide a different ground truth results than in another environment. So many different environments. Of course, this data would need to be shared securely and anonymized and so on. But in this era of communications and web-based workshops, I don't think this is a problem. So we would need to share data, find experts at different institutions, and make them to delineate the same data. Of course, this is tedious, but it would be a good advantage.
I think, thank you very much. I think we should move further. But before I will introduce next speaker, just let you know that at the moment, there are 350 people who are listening us from all over the globe. So this is certainly something. Marko Globočnik is next speaker. He's coming from the Institute of Jožef Stefan Institute, and the title of his talk is Digital Twins for Mastering Complex Dynamics. Please, Dr. Grobelnik.
Hello, Marko Grobelnik, right? So my name is Marko Grobelnik from Artificial Intelligence Lab from Jožef Stefan Institute. Let me just start the presentation. So my talk will be less medical and a little bit more technological, since I'm coming from AI field. And my point is mainly to introduce the concept of digital twins, which might not be well known in the medicine, but it's kind of a type of technology which I guess should be exploited, and I'll show a couple of examples. So basically, it's always the same dilemma, right? So we have simple answers, but often wrong, right? But a little bit more complex, but right. So now how to, in these complex situations or complex systems, how to go to the more complex but right answer. So this is really this technology about. The underlying concept which we talk here is the situational awareness, especially when we talk about dynamic systems, right? So this is one diagram which is, I guess, well known in a little bit more in social sciences, I guess, about situational awareness, which basically tries to deal with how to understand a complex situation, how to comprehend it, and how to project this towards decision and to do the right decision and consequently an action which further exploit the understanding in the loop, in the feedback loop, right? Mostly perception is automated, so these days, right? But the problem appears with comprehension and projection stages, and now this is something which we would like to automate as well with today's AI technology. So digital twin is kind of type of technology which is a good response to this. So like just one more like introductory slide. So in the past, complex dynamic systems were typically modeled by differential equations or by more like traditional, sometimes even ad hoc techniques, and mostly on structured data, right? But today, there are plenty of new challenges, right? So data is not anymore structured. We have plenty of unstructured data, text, images, movies, networks, right? Not just social, but any kind of networks. And all this data is coming in at some speeds on a huge scale usually, and as said, so in different modalities. And typically we would want to have real-time response. Now, especially what's relevant is also this causal modeling of these dynamic processes, which is often not, especially in today's AI, still not exploited yet. So we would like to understand this causal mechanics of the processes, which we might not even know very well. And usually we don't have time to build kind of nice models, which as we used to be used in science, right? So this is the digital twin technology. Now, what kind of questions usually we would want to be answered by, let's say, digital twins? So first, we would like to understand the history, how the history was structured, how the history of this dynamic system was structured. Then root cause analysis. If something happens, right, we would like to understand what kind of causes are leading to this particular event or phenomena which we spot in the data, right? Then we would like, for a given situation, right, we would like to understand what will be the next, the future, either in the form of events or trends. Then having this, right, once we have this kind of causal structure of the model, at least probabilistic causal structure, we would like also to have what-if questions. So we'd like to simulate possible futures, right, for the purpose of making good decision. And also there's this area of sort of, we would call it unknown knowns, let's say, and sometimes also unknown unknowns, where machine would basically warn us about the situations which we should be able to know about, but we are not capable of even asking for such situations. So these are kind of typical scenarios which we would like to have in this kind of dynamic systems. I'll briefly go through 3 examples, so just so that I illustrate how this works. First, industrial digital twins. So this is something, an area where digital twins are used. Then science digital twins. So this is something which is a little bit more innovative and which is already a little bit more complex process. And as a last example, I'll provide this forthcoming country digital twin, right? So let me first show small example. This was a project which we built for Bloomberg. So Bloomberg, it's a huge company, and one of the critical systems they have, right, it's handled by, I think, 150 people, and there's no single person who would really understand what's happening there, right? So, it should be fail-safe. As in often like in medicine and some other systems. So the point was, can we develop a system which would detect smoke before any kind of fire would actually appear? Fire is already too late, right? Smoke is still okay, can be managed. So we built the system to monitor such complex IT system. Roughly, we get around 5 billion input events per day. This is just to understand roughly 50,000 per second. And our task was we should deliver up to five alarms per day, not 6, not 7, not 10, up to 5, because if it's more, then the operators cannot handle anymore usually, right? But these 5, better to be good, right? So here I'll show you one simple animation. I think it's somewhere here from this system. And this will be a quick simulation of how these 5 billion events are actually happening, how the system is building this causal structure on the fly. And here you will see one anomaly being spotted. An anomaly is being spotted somewhere here, right? And then the system is able to explain what's happening and to point people or operators to. So this is now the process how to this is the anomaly and how the system then explains what to do, right? So so this is a sample of the actual system, and so this is really a small needle in a huge haystack of so these are just explanations how to how to react to this anomaly. Okay, let's go to the next example. So this is something which we call science digital twin, or a journey of an innovation, or a journey of an idea. So this would relate to any kind of science in principle. So this is collaboration with OECD. Specifically for the area of artificial intelligence, but it's made as a generic tool. So the task is really to track an innovation from its very inception typically in academic space, and possible realizations in later on in business world. And the goal basically is to detect these groundbreaking ideas very early in the process, or before they're even spotted, right? And the basic hypothesis is that everything what will be considered as an innovation in 5 years, basically it's already written somewhere in at least some kind of maybe obscure academic papers, right? And the point is to detect these ideas early on. So this is roughly a model, which a narrative of a model, really, which we have. So and which we try to model. So typically, innovation is spotted first in the academic world. Later on, we would see the patents. Then companies usually would get established around this innovation. We would spot in investments. We see the influence on job market. Then typically market reacts. Search engines like Google in this case would provide signals that something is going on early on, right? And also media. So each of these lines here is covered by one data set. They're all real-time data sets. As you can imagine, they're all pretty diverse, right? From academic patents down to media and search engines, right? Including investments. So all these real-time or close to real-time, typically they would be weekly or bi-weekly updates, are connected. And this is something where we would spot then the groundbreaking ideas, which may turn to some kind of business innovations with some business value later on, right? So this is now still in progress, but it looks very good. So this is something which will appear in, I guess, in the next 6 months on OECD. As a joint collaboration with Josef Stefan. And the last one I wanted to spot, so this is something which, so Josef Stefan is doing several things on the side of Corona, how to help Corona crisis in the country. So some of our colleagues like Leon Cecil are modeling and forecasting the pandemics, the numbers, infections, deaths, and so on. So our response was, let's build a country digital twin. Why? because, well, what we learned actually during the COVID crisis. So speed of decision making increased definitely, but systems definitely are not prepared for this kind of speed up. Adaptation to all these new situations which we are experiencing became total necessity. But as you know, state and many systems are just too slow, right? We have many solutions which work well on isolated problems, but there's no good holistic picture, particularly in the societal space. On the other hand, data is there, right? Data which are measuring all parts of society are there, but they're not typically integrated, and even worse, right, not accessible easily. And lastly, technology is available, right? Technology is not a problem, but certainly it's not used on the critical spot. So this is like was a starting point to build this Slovenian digital twin, where basically we would like to answer these kind of questions like what, when, where, who, whose. So this would be origin of the data, provenance, why, so that we have this causal model, why things happen, and what if, so that we can also simulate possible futures. So this is just, I won't go too much into the details, but these are roughly data sets which we are in a process of collecting and modeling for the purpose of this informed decision making on a country level. So this would obviously include health, pharmacies, general stores, economic data, supply chain data, extremely important, right? Transport, energy, media, and also informal signals from the society. So these are like three examples of digital twins, which some are done already, some are in the process of being completed. Just in summary, right? This digital twin technology is something which I think it's worth being careful about. It's well used in manufacturing, so like this Industry 4.0, but these approaches are not transferred to many other areas. Like a factory is not very different from, let's say, a hospital, connecting everything from sensors which are on people up to the whole logistic process and telemedicine and so on. So hospital is a huge hub of data collection, very heterogeneous data collection here. I see as a good opportunity as well. So as said, so it's not exploited yet in all possible scenarios, including medicine, and I hope this will also provide an invitation to use this technology. Thanks very much. That's the end of the talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grobelnik. Very interesting topic and very interesting talk, but we are behind our schedule, so I will immediately introduce the next speaker, and this is Professor Maja Čemažar. She's research director at the Institute of Oncology, Ljubljana, and she will talk about research activities at the Institute of Oncology. Please, Maja.
Thank you very much, Primož, for the introduction. As Primož said, actually my presentation will be a bit different than the other presentation in this second part of the workshop, because my task today is to present an overview what is going on the Institute. So first, if I want to introduce the Institute, I must say that we are a public health institution. We are the hospital, and our main goal is to treat cancer patients in Slovenia. However, beside this, we also need to perform the education, the research, and also we have to foster and perform and develop the most sophisticated treatments in the country. That's why we actually apply every 5 years for the title Clinical Institute, which is granted by the Ministry of Health. And this is also prerequisite that we can teach all the Slovenian students in medical, biomedical, nurses, radiological, medical physicists study program, that they can have a practical work at our hospital. So besides these professional and teaching activities that we have, we are also registered at Slovenian Research Agency. And all the researchers at our institute are actually included in one research group. And currently in our research group is 210 researchers with 21 technical associates. So it means that around 20% of people employed at the institute, because 1,200 people are employed at the institute at the moment, are actually involved in the research. We have several research programs founded by the Slovenian Research Agency. These are the foundation for the research, because this is a long-term financing. And as you can see from these titles, we're actually covering all from the prevention, the translational oncology, diagnosis, some predictive factors, and also the heredity cancers, and also the treatment. So we are actually covering with these research programs all the fields that are in oncology with a very multidisciplinary discipline. Institute of Oncology, and the one that is here, the last, the medical physicist. This is in collaboration with the Institute Jožef Stefan. The leader is Professor Jeraj, and the one who is in charge at the Institute of Oncology is Dr. Božidar Casar. Here on the next slides are the number of national and international projects that are currently ongoing at the Institute. There are more and more projects going on at the Institute, and mainly we are collaborating with the University of Ljubljana, National Institute of Biology, and Institute Jožef Stefan. Also, the number of international projects is increased, and also the black one, other national project, this is from the Ministry of I don't forget which one, but this is the one, because we were talking about the gene therapy at the beginning. This is the project that is based for the first clinical trial of gene therapy in cancer patients. So it's a project of almost 3 million euros for this project on gene therapy. With the international projects, this is the main networks and projects that we are currently involved. We are very happy that we are involved in 2 European reference networks. One is for rare cancer, Eurocan, and the one is for the heredity cancer, Venturias. This is actually networks that were formed based on the patient proposition. Then, as we are going to be acquired for the accreditation as an oncology accreditation in Europe, we are just currently finishing the project intent, which was a patient-oriented cancer center. This was the main topic of this project. Another one that we have is also based for the first clinical trial on cell therapy for the breast cancer, and we are also heavily involved in the project that are on the public health level. However, our primary goal is also to perform the clinical studies, so we are involved mainly in the European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer, ERTC. There are several working groups where our clinicians are involved, and mainly the clinical trials, the so-called academical clinical trials that are interventional, so they're actively including the patients for the treatment. There are currently 21 such clinical trials going on. We are striving to get more such clinical trials, but it's actually a big problem because Slovenia is such a small country. What we are actually also quite proud of that these researchers that are actually mainly clinicians and other scientists that have also routine work, that the number of publication is also slowly increasing over the years. These are publications that are mainly in journals with a high impact factor. And for the And one of the measures about how well is the work of the Institute of Oncology recognized internationally is this category, normalized citation impact. And I'm very proud that Institute of Oncology, the publications of the Institute of Oncology are very highly cited. We are on the second position after the University of Ljubljana. So this was a brief presentation of the research. If you have any other questions, you can either write to me and I will direct you to the right coordinator at the Institute, and I will answer all other questions at the round table. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chebychev.
Sorry, you didn't see this slide. This is the impact factor that I'm showing now. I'm sorry, it didn't move. So this is what we are proud of, the high citation of the publications of Institute of Oncology. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. It would be interesting to see comparative data from both clinical centers, but this will be for the next time. So the last speaker is Dr. Christian Anderle from Cosylab, and he will present Raptor initiative. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Strojan. So, hello everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today among some of the greatest minds of oncology. And I'm very happy to present today the Raptor consortium that, that I have a privilege of coordinating. And first, I would like to introduce what the Raptor consortium is. So we have a very strong vision. It kind of relates to the talks of Professor Boldfeld and Professor Mackey in the beginning, so that the research needs to have a strong vision and needs to be also, in some cases, goal-oriented. And this is how Raptor started. So with the initial vision, with the initial idea, and it proposes kind of a radical paradigm shift in the oncology radiotherapy. And basically, so right now, as we're used to the normal clinical workflow with the radiotherapy, is that patient has several visits before the actual treatment, because you have to prepare everything, do the planning, and then the patient, each time the patient comes, they need proper positioning. So it's all a very established process. And what the Raptor consortium would like to see is the shift that basically patient just comes for the first time, walks into the machine, stands there, and then just walks out. So basically, it's a really radical shift, that there's no positioning, no real planning, and so on. And we realize that this is a very, let's say, almost science fiction vision, but we think it is achievable. And with that in mind, we formed a consortium, a group of institutes and industry in particle therapy world to form around this vision and to see how we can make this science fiction vision become a reality. So that, and even if it takes years or even decades. And of course, to bring this in the end into the clinic, we need some advanced research from different topics, where as it is for example, for the computer science, the treatment planning, the positioning, the QA, the treatment delivery, the interface between all this. So it all has to scale, because if you think about it now, you have scales of days or even weeks between the treatment planning and actual radiation, and we want to move these to seconds. And so the original idea is, the idea originated from the Boldfeld, Jerai, and Pleško. So they came up with this vision, and they also formed the steering committee of Raptor Consortium. And we initially invited all the candidates or members to the meeting here in Ljubljana. This was 2 years ago, and you can see below the picture of all the participants. You'll also see that there are several familiar faces that you can also see today, because I think people could see themselves in this vision and want to contribute. The list of participants we're very proud of. So it's a worldwide consortium with or almost all of the leading centers or institutes in the particle therapy world that are now bringing together to bring this vision into reality. But of course, we realize, so this is a task that will be done in several steps, and that we have to kind of make this stepwise approach. to come at the end to this solution. And the first step we decided is, okay, we cannot do the treatment, the planning or irradiation in real time right now. But what we probably can do in the relatively short term is create a treatment plan daily for each patient. And we formed around this idea. So this will be the first project that we'll do. So we want to create a framework so that basically each patient can have a treatment plan based on their daily anatomy. And you have to solve several challenges in order to do that. Below you can see a diagram, what we see, what you all have to take into account. So we have to solve, for example, the QA problem in particle therapy. You want to be able to do the delivery, the treatment delivery fast enough. You also want to see the treatment planning to take into account, on one hand, all of the irradiation was already done, and on the other, the prescription that the doctors gave into beginning, and also do this without severely adding to the clinical workflow. So there are several challenges what we want to do, and we formed together a EU grant where we proposed this idea, and we were very proud that this EU grant was accepted, and now we have 15 projects. So these are 15 PhD projects that will happen in scope of Raptor Consortium, and the final solution, the final framework, will hopefully deliver the daily treatment plan for each patient in the particle therapy. So this was a very brief overview of where the Raptor is right now, where we are going, and I'll be happy to answer any additional questions or comments that you might have. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderle. I'm very sure we will talk more about Raptor during roundtable session. I would like to thank to all speakers. Thank you very much. And I would give the microphone to Robert, who will be chairing the roundtable session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Primož. I would suggest the following, that we do have a 5-minute break before we continue. I heard the recent suggestion that no meeting should be 1 hour long anymore, but should be 50 minutes. So people have at least 10 minutes to move from one meeting to another. And I think like in our 4-hour marathon, I think we deserve a few minutes. So I would suggest we get back together in 5 minutes before the hour. And that's exactly as planned. In the meantime, I would like to encourage everyone who is still listening to us to pose the questions either on YouTube or Facebook or email or any other way, and we'll try to integrate it into our roundtable discussion. Thank you, and we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Okay, I think we are back on the air. Yes, I guess we can, by the latest count, we're still having about 350 participants tuning in and listening. I would really encourage you, all of you, to participate via questions. Obviously, we have the panel of the speakers. Unfortunately, our first speaker, Thomas Bordfeld, had to go and have some other meetings, but we still got Rock with us. So thanks, Rock. I should mention this was his second, I guess, engagement after doing something in Kenya at 5 a.m. local time. So thank you very much. But thank also all the panelists that are really present the presentations. And I think just a sample of the opportunities that we have in Slovenia. And I should say that sometimes we don't even know about each other and what we work on. And just before we went live, we heard from Professor Shuput that said, like, wow, this is really great because we could use all this that we have heard today. And it really sometimes just takes not much to bring people together to start getting ideas. I also wanted to encourage Professor Grobelnik. I don't see him here, but I think he should start his AI-assisted science twin and tell us which are the best ideas we should move forward, because I think that's a great idea of how we can use AI to help our discussion. Okay, a little bit joke aside. So we would like to use this last hour particularly to address a couple of things. And I think the first talk, when we heard from Thomas Bordfeld, he got us some opportunities and some suggestions. And one of those was, what are the key questions that can really attract people from multiple disciplines together? I think the goal of this research center, if it is to happen, would be to bring people together in a way that normally they would not interact, they wouldn't come. I think if we all stay in our own little niches, we can do what we do. But really, the synergy comes when the forest becomes more than the trees that make the forest. So I think that's one of the objectives that we would like to hear from everyone. What are the opportunities that you see in terms of bringing together expertise that's not currently maybe as integrated? We've seen a lot of integration already happening, but obviously the goal is to get it more. The second one is also to see who else that is not participating today, but should be, that you know about. So this is really just the beginning of the networking that we're doing around this topic. We should engage in future. So obviously, these were some of the researchers that we knew, some that had time or they couldn't. This was like relatively rapidly that we organized it. And as we heard, the pandemic definitely doesn't help, because a lot of our, especially clinical colleagues, were unable to attend because of really crisis that's going on in the medical centers. And then finally, I think what we would also like to hear is what were your thoughts on international engagement and relations. I think clearly that the research center in Slovenia cannot live in its vacuum. Slovenia is integrated within Europe, it's integrated within the world. So I think definitely leveraging this would be important. And finally, and I think also, I know that Rock would be very much, but not just Rock, but a lot of our industrial colleagues that are here. I think really, if we want to make it something successful, the participation of industry together with the clinical colleagues and academic colleagues is really the key to success. So thanks, Thomas. I saw that you managed to rejoin the roundtable. I really appreciate it. With this, I would like to just ask you, so what do you think? And maybe I'll give it back to Rock and Thomas. From what you've heard that's been presented, from what you know about Slovenia, so what do you think could be some of the topics? I know, Thomas, you mentioned, some of the topics would be for example, against towards the personalized medicine, the Raptor idea, that were, Raptor is more proton. So we heard from Rock about upright radiotherapy, but I'd like to open it a little bit broader into, just reflecting with some other things that you've heard that are happening and some other opportunities that you think we can have. So any thoughts from the outside? So Rock or Thomas, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed by the quality of the lectures from Slovenia. And, I think that optical techniques, in fact, have a role definitely in proton radiation therapy. The characterization of the surface of a patient is really relevant because proton beams start at the surface and they migrate into the patient. So if the surface ain't right, then the treatment's not right. I also think that that we should be looking at full integration of surgery into radiation oncology, and surgery is a profession now that's under a microscope or in an endoscope, and all surgical suites have cameras, and there's a tremendous amount of information that will help us in figuring out if the tumor is in the field, or if the tumor is where we think it is when we look at a medical image. That can be correlated together. The deformable mapping of the surgical field into a medical image field can be done. And again, all of this potentially can be integrated together. Robert's working on medical oncology and immunotherapy, the imaging engaged there. Biopsy should be done under image guidance. Why do we just stick needles in? Why don't the needles have cameras? And then all of this data that we could collect from all this stuff, it's perfect fruit for artificial intelligence. And so, is there a bigger Raptor? Could you extend Raptor to all of oncology? Basically, patient walks in diagnosed and treated, or diagnosed then gets surgery, then gets treated, maybe even in the same day. Be very efficient.
Yeah, I unfortunately I missed the lectures, most of them, but just going through the list of titles here. So, I mean, Andrei Stuhn mentioned the personalized medicine, which I also mentioned. I think that would be a great topic for, as a sort of seed to develop a research program around that. Then one thing that I haven't mentioned in my talk, but that was the topic in the talk by Thomas Protovec, sorry if I don't pronounce that correctly, but about the automated delineation of organs at risk, and we are mostly thinking about target volume delineation. That is a very big problem in our field, and it calls for a solution by artificial intelligence, and it's an even bigger problem to define the tumor targets than to define the organs at risk. So I'd say that all of those are ideal topics for making a contribution to shaping this research center. The one thing that I also mentioned in my talk is it would be great though if you could identify just one big theme where all the projects are contributing elements, but they will come together to make this bigger picture. Because that is, I think is the most promising road forwards to really make a change in the world of clinical medicine.
Thank you, Thomas, for questions that Rock mentioned was, impact of image-guided surgeries. I know that Tomasz and his group has worked quite a lot on spinal surgery, etc. So I think that that's potentially, again, and that can link to the biopsy, where we go, with the more informed information. So I was wondering, like, Tomasz, maybe your thoughts on that. Obviously, it's just like the work how you're doing in the, not Atlas-based, but basically AI-defined organ segmentation. We're doing the same thing for purpose of immunotherapy. So clearly, a slightly different objective, either for radiotherapy planning, where you have very detailed description of all the critical organs, or something they look at a level of adverse events that are happening in immunotherapies, but clearly synergies. So where else do you see, kind of like an opportunity in a center like this, that, some of the work that, or some of the limitations that you had so far, which I know, we used to talk about access to the data, access to the clinical side. So do you see that like such center could help, like you and your group?
Yes, thank you. So, like Thomas mentioned before, target volume delineation is also very important in this respect. So in our group, we started quite recently with radiotherapy planning and medical image analysis in radiotherapy planning. As you mentioned before, for more than 15 years, I was involved more in orthopedic applications and with spine imaging. So I just recently moved into this area, but some problems are the same, are basically common in medical images. So we can transfer this knowledge we gained before also to this specific topic. And so far we started with head and neck images, because we agreed with Professor Stoyan, and we also are collaborating on this national project that we obtain head and neck images of the same patients from CT and MR. Okay, so they're CT and MR image pairs from the same patients, and we will try to see if we fuse this information from CT and MR, if we can improve the segmentation. Probably the improvement will not be so drastic as I was shown in the presentations. So for 10% of the ICE coefficient that was from Atlas-based to deep learning. But maybe every percent here is already a big step further, especially for some organs at risk that are quite tedious to delineate manually. Okay. Yes, so next step probably is target volume delineation with deep learning. There are some studies from groups worldwide that are already targeting this kind of segmentation. Of course, tumors come in different shapes and locations, so it's automated delineation of tumors. It's an even more challenging task, but to some degree it can be approached also with deep learning, and of course a big leap has been done also in this area, so it has potential for future development as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Maybe a question, but maybe we'll get to this in the later. So what are other groups that you might know, or from your faculty that, we could engage besides your group, other researchers, and also I think in, international partners. So I think that's another thing, to basically leverage our networks of international collaborations to bring people in. But one point that I want to come later on, I know that pretty much all the treatment planning software companies have really adopted now AI-based, contouring. And I think, which again, calls for collaboration between the academics and industry and engagement of them. But let's leave this for the time being. I want to move to another point, and you talked about multi-modality imaging. So, and clearly we heard a great talk about the potential from MR. I think, Professor Schuput has one of the few research, not the research, but the clinical research MR scanners that has been, successfully, even though I would say probably painfully, getting into practice just because it's so hard to do this in an environment which is, in a kind of like research environment. So I would like to ask, him to maybe comment how like a center like RC Advanced would help, looking back through everything that he has to go through, what would be opportunities to integrate and kind of like an expand, and that it says like in a multidisciplinary team expertise that would be there, opportunities to work on projects like, MR guided proton system with a new upright prototype, for example. So kind of like the sky's the limit. So what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you for mentioning our center. It's really a bit difficult to work only as a research center because it costs a lot to run the center. And the other thing is that we are a bit too limited, and all the connections we have are partly with your Stefan Institute, Professor Sersha, and now, of course, we came in contact with you and many other valuable people, but we don't actually do much together yet. I hope we can in the near future. Right now, we have collaboration with KU Leuven, then with Graz University. They have very good group of medical physicists working mostly on quantum susceptibility imaging. Well, myself, I'm mostly involved in neuroimaging and only partly in oncology. But I'd like to mention Andrei Vogt. He's electronic engineer, and he spent as postdoc some time at NIH with Bob Cox and Ziad Saad. And they developed quite a nice way to segment images from brain without any priors. It's very time consuming because the idea actually came out during lunch when we were talking about people and how do you, let's say, judge and know about people. And we say in Slovenia that if you know who you are hanging around with, then you know what are your interests, or so you know the other person better. And so it's the same with voxels in the image. So we came from neighborhoods, and from these neighborhoods you could calculate where is one part of the brain or the other. And the interesting thing is that we applied that to brain with tumor, and most other segmentation techniques would fail because there's nothing in priors. But this method worked smoothly and really beautifully. But I must say that it takes 2 days to analyze. It's huge computational burden, and it's not useful yet, but maybe in the future it will be. And maybe with the help of deep learning, or if you come together with Andrei, we could find some solution that would run faster. Because I could say that the solution we have is good, but it's not useful because you cannot apply for each person 2-day analysis to find the solution. So I think it's really, this initiative is wonderful for Slovenia. I think we have many groups which are quite good in isolation, but could be even much better if we work together.
Thank you. And for those who might not know, that Professor Shubod used to also be the Dean of Medical School. I think, and that's maybe the question. And then also I'd like to go to Maya. What are the groups from the School of Medicine and then also from Institute of Oncology? Because obviously, we talked about imaging, radiotherapy today, but there is life beyond that. There are a lot of biomarkers that are integral part in clinical decision making. If I just remember, Marco was talking about, input. There is much more sparse data that we have in medicine, but still, that's a good challenge to probably bring in. So before I forget, I think everyone here on the panel and everyone listening has a homework that should suggest at least one new person to invite into this group. So I think we'll very quickly get to all the, I guess as we know in Slovenia, to all the relatives and everybody that we know each other. But anyway, let's go into maybe Maya. What do you think from perspective of groups at Institute of Oncology? Did you think that would be interested, and then we should integrate, or we should ask that they think they have interest in a center like this?
Yes, thank you for this question. As you probably saw from my presentation, the number of the projects at the Institute of Oncology is actually steadily growing up, which means that our researchers and our clinicians are more and more involved in the research. I think that this was done based on the decision that we will actually support the researcher with a lot of administrative help, because this is one of the main problems with the clinician scientists, that they don't have time to prepare all the administrative work, all the paperwork. So this support, I think it's very important. And another thing that I think that because Institute of Oncology is a comprehensive cancer center from its very beginning, which is now more than 80 years. We just celebrate the 70 years of cancer registry. So our institute has a very valuable data. We have also, as you probably know, we have the screening for the memory cancer for 10 years now. So we have a lot of very good data. And we are now more and more open, and our clinicians, researchers are actually open for the suggestions, for the proposals. We are collaborating also with the medical center here in Ljubljana and in Maribor. We have this, they are involved in our program grants. We collaborate also a lot with these pathology departments for the biobanks, because especially with the liquid biopsies, we want to actually correlate all this data together, because one is medical imaging and the other thing is also the genetic data of the patients and the tumor. And if we will be able to correlate all this data, then this with the clinical data of the treatment and outcome of disease, I think that this is a very good way for the personalized medicine, that we combine all this. And we have actually everything. We have a department, we have a strong department for the epidemiology, we have a strong department for pathology, molecular diagnostic, and all our treatment sections are also very much involved in the European projects now. And I think that there is a big potential for the groups in the institute. Because as it's told you, there are 21 clinical trials going on, interventional, but overall we have more than 100 small research projects, also with a lot of colleagues from the universities that are going on. And a lot on medical imaging, but I think that Primož will be probably more competent to comment on how many studies are going at the radiotherapy and medical imaging.
So thanks, Maya. I just want to correct. So the homework for you is more than one person. So you have to have at least 20 more people that you have to suggest to invite. Joke aside. No. But I think it would really be, I think, counting on you, I think, to identify, like, and within the sort of oncology that I know quite a few groups, but many that not know, that I think could really benefit from this. So maybe moving to Primož, I think from the clinical perspective. So how do you see the clinical benefit and benefit of patients, but also the benefit for clinician researchers? That such a center could facilitate and make life easier. So what are your thoughts?
Look, what I think about this, that there will always be some proportion of people who will not have any interest in research for one or another reason. But for the rest, we need to we need to prepare conditions that they will be able to develop their skills. Professor Chebychev already mentioned that some conditions that must be fulfilled, like to help with paperwork, etc., etc. This is the task for the organization. But what is also important is to facilitate and financially support different connections with different institutions, particularly in abroad. This could be particularly for young researchers, very, very stimulative way for further career. What would be other thoughts? I think that our research is too segmented, and this initiative, which we are presenting today, is the best opportunity to put on one table all different ideas from very different sides or very different partners, and according to let's say a predefined selection criteria, choose the most interesting projects, most interesting ideas, and with the help of different partners, upgrade those ideas to be on sufficient quality level that we can sell them in research world. This is what I think is very important for clinical researchers, because you must be aware that still major part of clinicians' time in the hospital will be spent for the patients, not for very high level research, but for routine clinical work. Yes, it is the basis for any research, clinical knowledge, clinical work, but still, on the other hand, clinical research can be can negatively impact their research ambitions. So, in this Slovenian health system, we must find some kind of equilibrium between laborious research work and, on the other hand, time for laborious routine clinical work, and on the other hand, for research activities. And this equilibrium is usually not very beneficial for research activities. This is quite a big problem here in Slovenia, I believe.
Yep. Thanks very much for highlighting not just all the potential, but also some potential barriers. And I think, but at the same time, opportunities. I really like, Roxanne's attitude to every problem is actually an opportunity. And I think that's exactly how we should see this. And, but, I would like to maybe ask Andrei, because Andrei's been very instrumental, I think, in moving a number of projects, just maybe reducing some of the barriers. For example, with DORA, a screening program that Maya mentioned, like the breast screening program with a number of clinical trials, setting up some of the infrastructure for data collection, etc. So, Andrei, how do you see, or from your experience, and spending quite a bit of time between the university and the Institute of Oncology, talking to a number of people and trying to set certain infrastructure in place to make things easier for clinicians. So how do you see? the barriers, but also opportunities.
Thank you, Robert. First of all, I was impressed with Thomas Bortfeld's talk, particularly with the initial setting where he was describing Heidelberg and its similarity to Ljubljana. And I think a lot of things that Thomas was mentioning, they're already here in Slovenia. So we have all the interesting partners are already in a very narrow basin around Ljubljana. So we have great industry here in form of Cosylab. We have great universities here. And we also have great clinics here, which is, of course, very important. And I think that since we have the medical research group, we really started to combine all this infrastructure or resources into a meaningful assembly. Going back to your particular question, I do spend quite some time with clinicians, and a lot of effort was done for them to securely and systematically collect data. And I think that's a very challenging issue, since data collection, of course, medical data being rightfully protected by laws and ethics, is a very challenging thing to collect, particularly if you want to have deep data, which means that you want to collect not only isolated variables, but you really want to integrate the whole patient or the whole, as much as you can, of the patient history. In that aspect, it helped us a lot that we could somehow integrate same software running at the clinic and the same software running outside of the clinic, which makes the access to the data and trying out different analysis routines quite simple. And we were lucky with DORA. We were really, how do you call that? We were greeted with open hands, and we really got a great exception. So we were also talking to the information department, which is sometimes very difficult in a hospital. And they provided us with great infrastructure to really start collecting data at the site. So this data is collected within the hospital firewall, which means that all data still remains private. It's still in the hospital. There's no data leakage outside. The only thing that gets leaked outside is maybe small samples of anonymous data, which we are using to develop our reconstruction or reconstruction analysis routines. Then we transform that same routines back to DORA and do the real analysis of these huge samples of data. And that was a great experience, and a lot of clinicians that we worked with were really impressed of where the data is and how the data is collected and where you can just use the data as it is over there. And I think we helped them a lot, particularly in that administrative sense, which Maya mentioned before. And we started, so we're now working on the third or fourth project already with them. So one is the immunotherapy, and we started first with the immunotherapy of non-small cell lung cancer. Now we're moving to immunotherapy in melanoma, metastatic melanoma patients. We're looking at adverse effects. And it's been a great experience for us to be able to do that. Maybe that's it for now. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I think you're nicely highlighting, some of the challenges with data, but also opportunities and like open hands and, very much willingness to partner and collaborate. And I know that's been a challenge all across, not mentioning international collaborations. But maybe with this, it's time to maybe just talk a little bit about the data. I know Marco was talking a lot about data in other areas where data is very dense, where it's very frequent, where it's a lot of data. But typically we still don't have, a patient, even though like in some examples, you might have like monitoring more or less constantly of patients, but often they come in spurts. You get a scan here a couple of months later, and maybe a year later, which with a lot of dense data at that time points, but it's not like continuous series. So I wonder, from that perspective, Marco, in terms of opportunities, or people interested in data sciences that would be interested in a new challenge of data that's a little bit different, medical data. You said like you haven't really collaborated, but how do you see opportunities and also some just theoretical challenges, for people that like to deal with new class of problems?
Yeah.
In addition to existing that we already heard, segmentation, automatic planning, etc.
Yeah. So what I would suggest, and this was something which we were planning, but we didn't get approved the project with Topolšica, right? So just to transfer the solutions which are currently used in factories and transport it into the hospital environment, right? Just to redefine some of the concepts, but generally the solution would work out, I guess, pretty well, but at the moment it's not happening much. So this would be, I think, the first step, really. So to understand these complex organizations like hospitals or factories or some others, right? They live on many layers, right? And they operate on many information systems, and data are coming from all over, and they are typically first not integrated. They are not understood properly, and certainly if it's not integrated, then you cannot even do any follow-up steps, right? So my suggestion would be, let's first test what's already out there, which is even Slovenian technology, on the actual real-life hospital example. Right, so this would be the step number one. In the meantime, right, so I think the more like the technical side of the team, and this is pretty important, although sometimes underestimated, would actually learn what else could be done in the field of medicine, right? So, for instance, when we started working with factories and some other environments, first we said, okay, let's step in and we will solve the problem and then we'll move further, right? No, the technical part was the easiest. The more problematic part is to understand all these hidden complexities, which is typical or informal complexities, which appear in this kind of medical environments, or for the same matter, in factory environments, right? And this took us most of the time, actually. And this is also the reason why these technologies didn't come yet into some other environments, as, let's say, factories. There was lots of investment in this. That it's kind of clear why this happened there, right? But in medical environments or maybe some others, simply there was no proper investments, I guess, in this. So to your point, right? So I think the first step would be, let's deal with kind of what's manageable and what's possible to do in a kind of fairly short term, and then in the meantime learn about other possibly complex problems which appear and which are not even addressed or even identified yet. So this is in my talk I was mentioning, but I didn't go too deep into this so-called unknown unknowns, right? Region, right? So this technology can also identify not just that it provides answers, it can provide questions, relevant questions for the people which should be answered as well, right? So these technologies can go that far as well. It's just, both sides, so the AI and the domain experts need to be close enough, I guess.
And I guess you're summarizing that there is a lot of tools that exist that might be solutions that are already right there, but just like getting together with the people who are domain experts and know what the problems are could relatively quickly lead into more opportunities, but also more challenges. But one thing
you see, tools exist for, I would say, narrow AI. I'm not sure. I was not present on for the whole event, right? So, but in AI, we split AI into so-called narrow AI. So this is all the tools you can download for free and so on. This would be deep learning and so on, which it's solving very hard problems, but narrow problems, right? What I was talking about is digital twin. This is not narrow anymore. It's a holistic system, right? Which has lots of components, right? And this AI is kind of gluing together the whole thing, right? So, and here the tools are not available. If you try to buy the tool, you wouldn't get it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like radiology and radiation oncology would be a good proving ground for your technology.
And,
for two reasons. One is that in radiation oncology, we see the patients multiple times. And so you get instances of the patient over time that you don't get hardly anywhere else in medicine. And radiology, you just have such a rich environment, just so much data that I think, I think your algorithms need to have some focus. And this is these two areas are the most data-rich parts of a hospital.
Yeah. I believe, yeah. But for instance, me as an AI person, I have no know-how about this. Yeah.
But that's what we're for. I mean, we do have that knowledge, and so I think it's a very fertile collaboration. In fact, this reminds me of of optimization work, and you remember the story too. So radiation oncology optimization is you have a huge number of optimization dimensions, right? You probably, in fact, you're effectively taking 10,000 possible beams and you have 10,000 possible control points. It's really like trying to do a matrix inversion on a 10,000 by 10,000 array, right? So a huge problem. And so the optimization people decided that this was a great large-scale problem, and they actually they chose radiation therapy optimization for about 10 years as a really well-defined, very large-scale problem for optimization research, and did a hell of a lot of work on it. And so I think these two disciplines would be a great avenue for AI. In fact, there's big collaborators in Wisconsin too on radiology and AI. Robert.
Fantastic discussion, and I think we clearly identified, and something that I don't want to forget, I think it's the role of industry that I think we should also address, which I think is critical. And I think Rock more than anyone, and of course we have Mark. Kristen unfortunately had to step out because of family obligations. Can attest that I think in order to move something forward in medicine that really hits the adoption, really needs to get industry engaged. So how in a center like this, industry should be integrated and collaborated, and just thoughts on that. So
I think you start by having the will to work together, right? And that's the first thing. So at the highest level, for example, in the university and the hospital, is that the industry is not the enemy. They're the friend, they're the partner. And so that's a very good attitude to start with. If you don't have that, you have a big problem. So you need to work on the IP issues. You need to work on conflicts of interest. In fact, don't call them conflicts of interest. Call it conflict management, because anytime you get two people together, you have a potential conflict, right? You always are managing it. We're doing it all the time. You manage conflicts every day. You just don't realize it. We need to do the same thing. Conflict, quote, conflict of commitment, or authorized commitments for faculty to spend time with industry. And industry giving time for people in their companies to spend with academics. That's when you're going to really get strong partnerships.
Yeah. No, and I think we've seen it. How getting industry involved with I just remember at times of TOMO, if there was no industry, if there was no collaboration between science, your clinical like Minesh and then company TOMO would never see the light of clinical adoption. And I think that's really it takes the infrastructure, but also take that.
Yeah, I like the following analogy. I use it a ton. So imagine that you're a civil engineer, and your goal is to build the most beautiful, most efficient, strongest bridges in the world. That's your thing. And wouldn't it be great in the engineering school if there was a bridge building company that you could work with, right? Well, that's what we have in medicine. That's what we have in medicine. We actually have, if you like, industry embedded inside the university. It's called a hospital. And so the people that are working on research really have that bridge building company inside their, or next to their department. So that's why it's such a fertile avenue for industrial and university collaboration. Hospitals are really the key because, in fact, they are industry. In the U.S., they're in fact, many ways treated like industry, and they have to make profits and all that kind of stuff, right? But in Europe, it's probably even a better situation because I think they don't quite behave in the greedy sort of way of as American hospitals, and are looking for more altruistic.
And I think you really highlighted, I think a key point is that, you know, a center like this has to be intimately integrated with the hospital and academic environment. So, which means like physical proximity, but also integration on any level, because people have to be, you know, like dual appointed. They have to have, they have to feel welcome, you know, that's their part of their institution. That's part of it. So because we are not running out of time, we still have a little bit of time, but I'd like to maybe open just to everyone for suggestions how we should move forward. I think, you know, Thomas, you were wonderful saying, you know, some of, things that would be opportunities, some of the potential barriers. I know we were talking, you know, certain things that Heidelberg is not anymore what it used to be. So, it's part of also challenges. But before we even go that far, is, some of the things to think about now as we're thinking this, but also some of the next steps. So what are everyone's thoughts that, what should be the next steps? We clearly talked that we should, identify the network of everyone who would be potentially interested. Obviously, there would be secure support from, broad the government, like the funding, etc. What are some also important steps? Which part of this was exactly this workshop that we wanted to start with a brainstorming, like big vision, and then say, okay, how do we make this reality? So how do we go? What are suggestions for next steps?
Yeah, I'd say, you clearly need to answer the question, what you want to do, like the what question, then the who question, your networks and who you're going to work with, and then also the how question. So what is the organizational structure above that or below that, let's say. And that, since you mentioned the Heidelberg story, I mentioned that, and we both mentioned it. So like it is critically important because there will be frictions that unavoidable, right? So if you have so many institutions involved, you need a good sort of leadership supporting structure that manages frictions. And so otherwise there will always be tendency for people to, do their own thing and be less collaborative. So I think you have to think about leadership at an early point.
Yeah, I think you should reach out to Toronto. The Techna Institute was a research and development institute for all of the hospitals in Toronto, and they've had their ups and downs. So I would approach Techna and get some guidance.
And we know some good friends that ran Techna too.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
David would be phenomenal to tap into. So now maybe to the Slovenian side. So what are your thoughts of potential, next steps, opportunities? It seems I just got the news. We are still over 300, participants here. So really, a lot of people interested in this. So obviously we have to keep going in terms of like the interest is there. So what do you think from Slovenian? Particularly, I think engaging the clinical community. So I think importantly to get really clinician researchers and those that would be interested. I think the basic researchers. I think that we're talking a lot of opportunities in oncology, university medical centers, other universities. So what are everyone's thoughts?
Well, I'm not from clinical community, right? So I'm more like from this AI, computer science community. So I would see these as especially as a very cross-disciplinary field, and this know-how, which is currently relevant. And I've seen in presentations, right, that many of the speakers were using pretty much up-to-date AI technology, right? But AI is moving further on, right? And so this cross-disciplinary link would benefit to the center, in terms of getting this current AI right away, right? So this is something which I would say from Slovenian side, but not from clinical community, right?
So Marco, do you think that might be worthwhile that we kind of like have a little bit shorter event like today, because that's quite a commitment, like 4 hours, but start bringing people around the problem, just scientific and some speakers. I think that would be stimulating, and we can have discussions. So I think that could be a great initiative that would start start building the bridges.
Sure. You see, maybe it's not clear, but Slovenia has maybe one of the largest AI research populations per capita in the world, right? So we have roughly close to 200 researchers only, right, in AI. So in like 6, 7, 8 departments, right, across university and the institute, right? So it's pretty decent communities. There are connections to medical field, but not probably enough, right? So in that sense, building this bridge would be beneficial definitely for both sides, right?
Yeah, you have 100 per million people per capita. If that was in the United States, you would have, my God, 33,000 AI researchers.
So we have 200. Yeah, I think it's 1 per 5,000 or something like this.
Yep.
I think it's really, one can see that it's very interdisciplinary field, but in the end, any medical research has to involve clinics. And I think that's the major obstacle. Of course, it depends on the country, but in Slovenia, I had experience because we bought the first tomograph together with the clinical center. And then we were pushed out. How can you do research when there are so many patients waiting? So, the main problem is that we don't have enough medical doctors. And at the time, several years ago, they wanted to import doctors, or they said there's not enough medical doctors produced at medical faculties. But the fact is that when we produced a bit more medical doctors, they didn't get jobs. So, it's really, we can discuss a lot in research, but without a global, in Slovenia, global view of the whole medical situation, it's very hard to do anything. If you look at Ministry of Science and Technology, they have no connection to the Ministry of Health and nothing with finances. It's a bit of lack of goal. If you don't have a clear goal, it's very difficult to proceed. You can have many individuals, they have internal motivation to do something. But to do something as really a team, an organized team, you have to get support in the whole community. And it's very, very difficult to achieve that.
Thanks very much.
Dushan, Robert, sorry to jump in, but
go.
Something that really challenges me, Dushan. And I'm having this discussion, many times in Slovenia. Can we do it ourselves, or do we have to rely on the ministry and the society and the community? Is for example this Proton Center an opportunity where we get enough critical mass, an infrastructure that can run for itself? It will treat patients during the days, or this 16-hour shift, and then we have time to do research. And can we show to the others, this is the way to do it, instead of waiting for somebody else to never do it?
Sure, we can, but actually the money is behind everything, If you don't get any funding for joint ventures, it's hard to proceed. But if you have funding for a center, we can do that without any ministry, that's for sure. But you have to have funds.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, something is that you said, but I think it's also buy-in from I think clinicians, and I think that's another thing is like people that are like on the ground treating patients, and I think there is again like opportunity I think for exactly that you said, I think it's a lot of people don't have time, but we've seen a lot of intake and excitement, especially newer generation, like from medical students, the good students that like to see, that I think that's having a center like this could be also attraction and opportunity for getting more students interested in clinical research. And I think that's another side effect of bringing together people, different disciplines. I know a lot of medical students are crazy about AI, and they're curious about AI. So I think, just that having somewhere to go to would make like the discipline also look different, at least in eyes of some that would attract them that normally would not maybe be interested in. So, but maybe as we're kind of like nearing the close, still would like to maybe hear from Primož, what do you think, engaging the medical community with, as we all know, like strapped little time, but a lot of self-interest. So how do you see, you think would be hard or relatively easy if we had something that would be already there?
Of course, it's possible. Of course, it's possible. This is why I'm involved in this idea or project of Proton Therapy Center. Yeah, but it's not only me. There are also people behind me. Actually, all department is interested in this project. Of course, some of us will invest more time, more energy in it. Some of them less, but still there is enthusiasm, there is energy to go this way. I believe that also for other projects, in other projects is the same. On the other hand, it is exactly as Professor Šupet mentioned. We have systemic problem here in Slovenia, but still somehow we are managing to do some research. Probably it will be the same in the near future. We will see, but certainly for Proton therapy project, there is an interest. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess we've got like the last 4 minutes by my watch. So any last kind of like words of wisdom, especially from Rock and Thomas, that you would want to share? Or, and again, I'm really interested in like what's next steps, not just one, but like some of things that might be worthwhile doing that you would recommend. And then obviously we'll take the advice extremely.
Slovenia is a small country, but it's still 20 times bigger than Athens at 500 BC when, it may have been the greatest point of humanity in terms of the arts culture. So if you specialize in something and do it very, very well, you don't have to be very big. You just have to be very good. And I think there's every chance that you could be good. Madison happens to have the world's largest medical physics department. Why is that? Because it had a few people at the beginning that saw a vision of getting physics involved in Madison. And Madison is only 200,000 people. It's a tenth of the size of Slovenia. So there's no reason why you guys can't have a tremendous impact on your university with first the Proton project, but then keep it moving, keep it expanding, and try to make it impact medicine as much as you can. And then you'll attract great people. You'll attract great graduate students from countries all over the world. And that's how you make a great academic career. And if you involve industry like you're doing, then it's an economic boon as well. I mean, Madison, because of the medical device industry here now, is it's one of the largest industries in Madison, right? So it's very possible. It's very possible for you to have a huge impact. In fact, you can have a huge impact. This small field can have a huge impact on a small country. I guess that's another way of putting it.
I completely agree. I just want to echo what Rock said, and I mean, you have the critical mass, as you see, by like more than 300 participants here, and the panel presentations, excellent work that's being done here. So you have all the resources, I'd say, that you need. So now you have to put it together, and that's maybe the challenge, how exactly you want to shape it and you know, to move it forward. But otherwise, I'd say the prerequisites are all there, and it's an exciting time. So I envy you in a way. So it's fantastic, as Rock said. I mean, so it's maybe a problem, but it's also a great opportunity for everybody to shape this thing.
Wow. I think, you know, I wanted to have like closing words, but I definitely cannot match what you, Rock, and Thomas said. I think the challenge is an opportunity. I think what we learned, I think, thanks to be part of our story, which I think is just at the beginning. And I think I would like to really thank you. I would like to thank all the panelists today. I would also like to thank a lot of people in the background that helped with this. So we have here Alenka, Anya, Andrea, Tiasha, then Yelena. So we got so many people that helped with this already before we even started. And then particularly thanks to all 300 plus people that tuned in. I think this is amazing, like spending the whole afternoon. And I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of things to do and worry about. But I think we are really just the beginning of exciting stories. So thank you so much, and watch out the space for more things to come. Thank you, everyone.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Yadra and Anya, for joining. Now the whole team.
Thank you. We support Mark.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.